What is the most heartbreaking thing someone has said to you? My mother has Alzheimer's. Before she was diagnosed, we all just thought she was acting kind of squirrely for years, but didn't think it was that bad. I lived 8 hours away, and she was rarely living in the same place when I visited. Her and my dad divorced about 2 years prior, and I think a lot of it was her early descent into Alzheimer's. But my dad is a pretty self-oriented person, and when she filed for divorce, he signed up, left her with no debt or problems, and severed all contact with her. She would accuse him of things and call the cops on him and my brother, and my dad will not even risk being in the same room with her, no matter what. He moved out of the country, and her life kind of slowly fell apart. She ended up living with a lady that was stealing her retirement checks and sitting alone in front of a TV all day. I had to locate her on a holiday visit one year, and we talked for a few hours, and her memory and understanding was worse than ever. She seemed like she was unfed and unclothed, but I was too poor to take her in myself. I had just started a family and was neck deep in problems myself. After a while, I had to go, and as I was getting up to leave, she kept following me, kind of like a puppy. It ended up with her standing on the porch with her hands in her pockets and my wife and I in the lawn trying to get her to understand we were leaving. When she asked where we were going, I said, "Oh, we're going to my dad's house." Her eyes lit up for a second and she said, "Can I go with you?" She said this in a sweet and excited tone. Probably the worst feeling I've ever had. She genuinely had lost ability to understand the situation or comprehend why she can't, or shouldn't want to. She had begun to slowly become like a toddler again, innocent in her ignorance but with the character of a full person. She's now in full-time care at a nursing home across the street from me, and I handle all her business. I'm the last person she recognizes. She's still alive, but I can't wait to hang out with her again in the afterlife. What happened during intimacy that made you realize it was a mistake? I met a girl at an after-hours club. She pulled me into an Uber and insisted we go back to her place. I'm noticing that we're going through progressively worse neighborhoods, but she's rubbing my tombstone stiffy pee-pee through my pants and kissing my neck, and honestly, at that point, we could be driving into North Korea. I was just trying to bury my bone. The Uber drops us off at a place that looks like a straight-up trap house. We go inside and she tells me to sit down and make myself comfortable. I ask her to turn on some lights and she tells me that she forgot to pay her electricity, so she'll have to light some candles. She spends 15 minutes lighting dozens of candles and the darkened room comes into focus. It looks exactly like John Doe's apartment from Seven. Walls painted black, weird animal bones ornaments everywhere, piles of journals and drawings. She slips off into a back room to get into something more comfortable. I hear her speaking. And then I hear someone else's voice speaking. She comes out of the room wearing only her undies, male undies. I disregard all the warning signs and I get back to it. She comes over, kisses me and then began to bob apples on my pee-pee. To my relief, she was a woman. During it, she stops and looks at me.
"Hey, so I need to ask you something. Would you be alright with my husband joining us?"
I glance over to the hallway and there's a huge grizzly bear of a man standing there, completely unclothed, covered in a literal pelt of body hair with his massive package hanging between his legs. My social anxiety took over and a weak "yeah, that's cool, I guess," came out of my mouth. We get started and she pushes me into the couch. I feel him swoop behind her like a vulture. She's doing her thing when, all of a sudden, I feel a slimy sensation on my gnards. And then I hear a sound, an unmistakable one. I lean her to the side to see this great silverback of a man as the source. I put my pants on so fast that I forgot to put my boxer shorts on and had to stuff them in my pocket. Meanwhile, she starts yelling at him.
"God damn it, Andre. I told you not to do any of that crap without asking first. Remember last time?"
And he's just profusely apologizing and telling me that he'll go back into the bedroom to let us finish. I opened their front door and ran for the hills. I soon realized that finding an Uber at 4 a.m. in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city is impossible. I returned back to their place with my tail between my legs and asked if I could stay until morning. They agreed on the condition that we continue. I went inside and what can I say, Andre knows what he's doing.
My dad neglected me for his narcissistic wife who wants to get rid of me. Now that they have a son, they want me to move out. My dad and my mom separated a long time ago because my mom messed around a lot with substances. Her pregnancy was very high risk because she found it really hard to quit smoking and drinking. My dad made her quit cold turkey, but he would always find her with a drink in hand. I didn't suffer a lot for it, but it definitely messed me up. When my mom gave birth, my dad went through with a divorce and got full custody of me. Since it was just us for a long time, I got very used to his presence and being the only girl in his life. He was a very busy man, but he always made time to watch movies with me, take me on vacation out of state. We even went to Disney World once. It was amazing with it just being the two of us. But then Nina came into the picture. Nina was my dad's wife whom he married 5 years ago. I'll admit I didn't like her. She stole my dad away all the time. She would constantly want to go on dates with him, so I had to stay with a babysitter or by myself when I got older. It got really lonely and I missed spending time with my dad. It seemed like Nina had it out for me and wanted him to start a new life with him and without me. She never even tried to bond with me. My dad would push for us to do girly things together, but Nina would always say she's too tired or say she already had plans. I got the hint and stopped involving myself with her. Because of this distance between us, my dad started to forget I existed. He would make dinner for the two of us and he got into the habit of only making portions for two. This meant that whenever he cooked, I would have to eat some leftovers or heat up some frozen food because Nina would always eat all of it. I've tried to talk to my dad about it, but he says I'm young and still trying to adjust to this life. I told him it's been 5 years already, I should be used to it by now, but things only get worse because Nina hates me. He tried to tell me that Nina was also struggling to adjust to having a daughter, so I should cut her some slack. Since then, I stopped confiding in my dad because he never took my problems seriously. I also had no other support to fall back on because we moved away from my grandparents when my dad married Nina. His family also didn't get along with Nina because I used to tell them how she treated me when we still lived close to them. This caused a lot of problems and we had to move away, which I'm still sad about to this day. I didn't know this for a while, but my dad and Nina were trying to have a child but couldn't. They kept this a secret from me, so right off the bat they weren't onto a good start. Then, they used a sperm donor because my dad found out he couldn't have any more kids. With that came along my half-brother Mark. Sharing my dad with Nina was already a lost cause, and now I had to share him with a sibling too? It really felt like Nina was trying to keep me out of this family since she was really pushy on the two of them having kids. Seeing my dad felt like a miracle since Mark was born. We used to spend 2 days a week together without Nina, but he told me he couldn't do that anymore with a new baby in the house. He explained that he couldn't leave his wife alone for 2 days a week with a newborn. I was obviously very angry about it because Nina had taken so much away from me. I kept distancing myself from them and they didn't even bother to check up on me. I wasn't seeking attention, but they hadn't heard from me or seen me in nearly a week and my dad never asked about it. Well, 3 days ago, he finally talked to me, but it wasn't for the reason I wanted. I thought he was going to tell me he wanted to hang out with me like we used to or just have a nice conversation with me, but no. Him and Nina had decided to make a nursery for Mark instead of having him in their bedroom. I asked what was the problem with that and he said they just wanted their privacy. So, our home has 2 master bedrooms and 2 bedrooms on the other side of the house. Those 2 bedrooms are empty, so it was perfect for Mark, except Nina thought it was oh so difficult to go to the other side of the house multiple times at night when Mark woke up. I said that's why they should have him in their room, but my dad suggested something so much better. He wanted me to give up my master bedroom for this little baby. It wasn't up for negotiation either. He wanted me to pack my stuff up and move out of my room. I didn't even try to fight it because I had enough. I just said okay and started packing. I overheard him telling Nina that I had agreed and she got so happy. She started talking about how she would redecorate my room, rid the walls of the ugly paint color I had chosen, and just leave no trace of me ever being in that bedroom. I was pissed and called my uncle to come pick me up. When he came, I saw him talking to my dad and I just said, "You can give my room to your son now," and we left. He texted me that I could only stay for 1 night, but I told my uncle I needed as much time apart from them as possible. I explained the whole situation to him, how Nina hates me, my dad won't listen to me anymore, and this new kid is replacing me. He let me stay for nearly a week. In that time, I saw my grandparents and I also told them everything. They were not happy at all and called my dad to tell him how bad of a father he is, along with some other names. I heard my dad say he didn't trust their judgment because I'm obviously the favorite, so of course they're going to take my side. I was sad that was his whole takeaway on this whole thing. It wasn't just about taking my side. It's about how I've been neglected ever since Nina entered into our lives and he refuses to see that.
How did your parents fail your life? I was taken in by a same-sex couple after my little brother and I were abandoned by my mom. One of them has their own biological son, but by the way anyways, I was the target for Christian Deanda's abuse. From 2010 up until March 14, 2014, I was physically, emotionally, verbally, and physically abused by Christian. These are the women I once called my moms. I was taken in by them when I was around 3 or 4. Initially they seemed like a very nice couple. They treated me and my little brother well. Erica was always very kind to me, but Christian never really was. They then started changing the way Christian treated me, specifically when I was about 6. I'm not sure why I was her target. Till this day I find myself wondering if I did something wrong for her to treat me like she did. It was Christmas Eve of 2011 and they allowed me and my brothers to open one gift that night. I don't remember what I got, but I remember what my youngest brother Erica's son got. It was a little computer that taught you the letters of the alphabet and I grabbed it from him to look at it. When I did that, Christian scolded me and asked me why I hit my little brother with it. I was really confused because I know I didn't hit him with anything. That night I was thrown outside and had to sit on the porch in the cold for hours. That was the night everything changed for me. Erica was gone Monday through Friday, so that just left us kids with Christian to care for us. She was a stay-at-home mom. Christian is the one who basically did everything to me. She had many different torture methods for me every day while her sons watched cartoons and got to play outside. She would throw me into cold baths and put ice cubes in it and made me lay in it for hours. When she was feeling really good, she liked to hold my head under water and attempt to drown me. I was only fed once a day, and if I didn't do a chore right, she wouldn't feed me at all. Sometimes I went a whole day without receiving any food. It came to the point where in the middle of the night sometimes I would sneak into the kitchen and eat almost a whole entire box of cereal because I was so hungry. One night I got caught stealing food and Christian decided that since I like to steal food I should be chained up. So the next day they went to Home Depot and purchased a dog chain for me. When we got home the chain was drilled into the wall and Christian chained me by my ankle. I was chained up every day unless she had something she needed me to do, or if Christian was in the mood to do something crazy to me. It came to the point where I was scared to ask if I could go to the restroom, so I would constantly piss myself and poop myself. I started doing it almost every day and it became a habit, but it was also disgusting to me because sooner or later I started smelling bad and Christian would just make me walk around like that while I did my chores. When I did sometimes get the courage to ask to use the restroom, Christian would punch, kick me and drag me to the restroom. Christian would have my little brothers pee on me, and Christian would sometime make me drink her pee. I was starting to get very weak from not eating and I started to have little blackouts while doing chores. Just for the hell of it, she would sometimes have me bathe in bleach and it came to a point where the skin on some of my toes was falling off. Christian would also put lemon juice on the missing flesh of my toes before sending me to sleep. That was one of the worst pains I've ever felt. She put me through more torture every day that I just don't want to think about. I was saved on March 14, 2014. Christian got life in prison and Erica got 11 years for not taking us out of that house. From there my biological brother and I were adopted into a family, and my youngest brother Erika's biological son was adopted somewhere else. They changed our names and now my last name is Achanang. I call them the Achanang since that's their last name. When I got adopted I really thought I was safe and wouldn't have to go through abuse again, but little did I know. For 3 years their biological son, who was only 2 days older than me, molested me and I never said anything because that's what I learned to do best at Christian's house. The parents never believed me, and when I told them, the mom said I was lying for attention. They never really supported me, and the mom also didn't accept the fact that I was bisexual, so she was always telling me I wasn't normal and that I was going to hell. I finally reported the physical abuse to authorities on November 2018 when I was in the 8th grade. I got removed from my adoptive home, and since then I've been in this horrible foster system. I'm only 15 years old and I have gone through the worst of the worst, and I'm still here fighting for the love of a family. I'm in a group home at the moment until a family wants me. But I am a troubled teenager and most families see me as a bad kid. That's how it's been since May 2019. So right now I'm still going through a very bad time, but I'm still going to continue to be strong for myself. My friend ruined several people's lives secretly, and I'm glad he did it. I have a friend from high school. We were somewhat close but never best friends. He was always super chill, calm during a crisis, really mellow and kind. He didn't talk a lot about what he did and was pretty private about his personal life, which our friend group always respected. He always disappeared immediately after school because he said he had a part-time job. In 10th grade a girl who we sort of knew was SA'd and the 3 people who did it were never charged. Everyone knew they did it, but they were on a sports team and got away with it. She took her own life later that year. My friend and I are in college now and we've gotten a lot closer. One night he asked me if I remembered that girl and I said yes. He asked me if I remembered the guys who did it and prodded me about how I felt about them. Obviously I hate them and said so. I was drunk and this was the first time we'd ever really spoken about this, so I was loud about it, and he got this sort of bizarre look on his face and showed me their Facebooks, Instagrams, other social medias, news articles, public info, etc. It was a really in-depth investigation of their lives and I admit I was weirded out at first. Apparently none of them are in college now. One is working minimum wage, one is serving time for assault, one isn't doing anything except bumming around at home. He told me that he'd actually been friends with the girl before she took her life, which I never knew, and that he'd quit his part-time job and started, in his own words, obsessing over getting justice. The main thing I remember was just how drunk I was and how weirdly calm he was. It still feels really fuzzy to me. He pulled up a drive with literal years of evidence. For one guy, he used his reputation as a teacher's pet to lower his grades, since the teachers believed him when he said the other guy didn't pull his weight on a major group project. That ruined his sports chances because he didn't make the GPA cut and the coach dropped him. He managed to find one of their private emails by reading it over his shoulder and used this Spokeo-like site to dig up more info. He anonymously emailed screenshots of their essay threats to the school counselor and got one of them investigated. He wasn't charged, but it made his team drop him because he couldn't show up to practice anymore. There was so much more I won't go into. There was a bunch of little things too, like how he sometimes shared cheat sheets in the class group chat that had wrong information to keep their grades lower. I also used those sheets. He apologized for making my grades worse. Or how he convinced a few upper year friends of his not to tutor one of them and they failed physics. He swore that he never made up any rumors or false information and worked as legally as possible since he was still hoping the courts would charge them. That never happened, but he did end up tipping the scales enough to ruin their lives. According to him, they ruined their own lives. He just documented it and sent it to the right people. When we were done he told me not to tell anyone and I promised I wouldn't. We sat there for a while and my head was spinning because I had no idea he'd done all of this. He thanked me for listening and said he'd never admitted any of this before, and went to bed. I admit I'm still disturbed by this, but it's not like he can unruin their lives now, and at least they face some sort of consequences. The more I sit with this, the more I think that I'm glad something happened even if it was like this. We're still friends. I still trust him. He admitted that he's probably got a mental disorder that made him this way and he's been in therapy for a long time. To this day, none of them ever faced justice for what they did to her, but their lives fell apart anyways. I'm glad that happened. I'm glad he did what he did.
Women, when did you realize people lied to you about body positivity? Have you ever seen a plus-size model with a double chin? You haven't, and here's why. I was so desperate to lose weight that I would fast for days just so I could get my dream job. In order to make it in the model industry, you have to accept that your body is no longer your own. You must be mendable and determined to shape and resculpt your body into whatever your higher-ups want you to be. And when you're working for Victoria's Secret, you have to accept that you yourself will never be the same after the trauma they put you through. When I first got the call that I landed my first gig as a Victoria's Secret model, I thought they wanted me for me. but the way they treated me made me feel like ragdolling myself off a roof. Victoria's Secret does a great job of concealing themselves and how they actually feel about larger people. They do discriminate against different body types behind the scenes and let you believe that they're body positive and inclusive. I thought that I didn't need to be as skinny as Alex Consani to thrive in the model industry, but Victoria's Secret just punched me in the face on my very first day. There was a line of women all waiting for their measurements to be taken by one man, who either made or broke you. My measurements were taken by this guy and immediately he told me that I had potential but I need to stop eating. When I asked him what I should cut out from my diet, he just told me
all of it.
He said that my tummy weight was taking away the fat I needed above. Yeah, he went as far to say that I was lacking biddies. Later on I received an itemized list on what I needed to do. I needed stronger calves, a slimmer waist, stretch marks covered, and bigger breasts. I was terribly overwhelmed. Accomplishing most of these things seemed completely unrealistic. What scared me the most is the department I was meant to work in was to model for bras. How the hell was I supposed to increase my breast size? Surgery wasn't an option for me as I was dead broke and I had given everything up for this model job. When I finally got a hold of the measurement man, I asked him what I was supposed to do about my milker situation. His response? Check your email. So, I did. And there, in my email, was an unironic, honest list of supplements that my company expected me to take just to grow my honker size. The crazier part? Those supplements worked. I went up an entire cup size in the span of 2 years, and my girls are still growing. I no longer work for Victoria's Secret, but now, my agent has me working with a new designer who is even more particular about the supplements I take. He's sort of a freak about it. I tried to go to Walgreens to buy the stuff, but his requirements are so specific that he literally had to send me links for each one. He'll only let me take vitamin B supplements, biotin from some random Chinese company, collagen supplements from this random company in Korea, and most importantly B Vitality for my chest because he thinks my old supplement was hindering my potential. It sounded like a load of crap to me, but I guess my agent knew what he was doing, because my body and skin have never looked so good ever since I started taking B Vitality and the other supplements. But even though I look natural, please just know that everything in the modeling industry now is a result of supplements, diets, and pure wealth. Natural beauty isn't enough anymore if you want to survive as a model. It's just a starting point. My golden child's sister is forcing me to give her my adoptive daughter, so I got my lawyers involved. My younger sister went through a pretty rough time as a young adult, drinking and doing substances and generally being wild. She ended up getting pregnant and giving birth at age 18 when I was just a few weeks away from turning 21. She did not want the child after giving birth. She refused to even pick up the child and would leave her sitting in dirty nappies. Despite never wanting children myself either, I stepped in and adopted my newborn niece as my daughter. My then boyfriend, who I'd been with for 3 years, gave me an ultimatum, him or her, as he didn't want children either. I picked her and he left me, which resulted in me suddenly being a single mother. The first few years were rough as a single parent, barely making ends meet, but I managed and my sister had nothing to do with us. I never once hid the truth from my daughter that she was adopted, but always assured her I loved her so much and was her mummy. When my daughter was 6, my sister was finally clean and wanted to have access to her. I allowed it, but stressed she would just be an aunt to her, and she accepted this, though it's clear she struggled with the concept and sometimes acted more like a mother, which I always squashed quickly. Now my daughter is 8 and I've been offered a job in a different country. The pay is almost double my current salary and the company is helping us find a home, putting my daughter in an international school and after-school care. So of course I'm going to take it, but this resulted in my family having a meltdown about how I can't do this and how it's cruel to take my daughter away from her family and how it's not fair to my sister. My sister has told me she won't allow me move away with her and that she'll fight in court to get my daughter back. I've talked to lawyers and it seems she doesn't have a leg to stand on, as my daughter is legally my daughter, but the rest of my family is telling me I'm being extremely cruel, and if I cared about my sister I'd turn this job down. I left home at 16 and finished my education. My sister meanwhile is the golden child who gets away with everything. She even now lives with our parents and doesn't work. My daughter, while sad to be leaving her school and friends, is excited for the move. I've been teaching her about the country every night before bed and we've gone to some authentic restaurants to try food from there. I've also promised her we'll fly back at least once a year to visit and she can FaceTime her friends. I feel like my family is angling for me to eventually just hand my daughter back over as if I was just a temporary filler for my sister, which will obviously never happen, and my lawyers are involved in this matter. So I got a call from the school today that a woman not on the list had came round and tried to pick up my daughter, claiming she was the mother. She had claimed there was a family emergency and she needed to take my daughter home early. Now only myself and my best friend are marked down as able to pick up my daughter, and when they wanted to see her ID she got cagey and claimed she forgot it. And when they told her she couldn't pick her up without an ID, she shouted at them before storming off. I have spent all day on the phone to my lawyers and my boss. My schedule is being moved ahead. I'd wanted to give my daughter a final Christmas in our current home, but it's clear that's not a safe idea anymore. Our move has been brought forward and my company is putting us up in a hotel until they help us find a home.
I told my daughter-in-law she was too obese to come to an event with us. My daughter-in-law used to be a model before she got married, and then after a couple of kids, let's just say she got quite the stomach. She is now severely overweight, and it's not like she is making an effort to change that. We have done plenty of things that are not physically taxing with her, but even the small stuff, she ends up on a bench half the day. We went to a small mall, half the day on the bench. She is obese, her ankles are swollen from her weight. The connection between her weight and not walking far without a break is very obvious. I have 3 girls and we still like to do girl trips for the day. My daughter-in-law's kids are only 8 years old and 6 years old. At this point, and she hasn't lost the weight. It's bad enough that she needs constant breaks walking. I used to like her and now I don't due to how she acts. Everywhere we go with her it is constant complaining that she is tired. The last girl's trip to the mall was spent sitting on a bench half the day since she needed a constant break. If you try to leave she will go on about abandoning her. It's annoying. I invited the girls to go to a farm for pumpkin patch and pick some apples. It is big orchards and a ton of walking. We went, it was a great time and some pictures went on Facebook. I got a call from Beth asking why she wasn't invited. I lied saying it was just a family trip and she accused me of lying. I had enough and told her the truth. I told her she wasn't invited due her weight. That she forces us to stop all the time and it ruins the trips most days since we don't get to do half the stuff. She called me a jerk and hung up. I am getting texts from my son saying to apologize but the girls are on my side and are sick of having trips ruined since we have to wait for her all the time. If you suddenly had $1 billion, what would you do? It was like a dream come true, the moment I found out that I was now a billionaire. I remember sitting there, staring at my computer screen in disbelief. It almost didn't feel real, like I was in some sort of alternate universe. And yet, there it was, in all its glory, a single number staring back at me, indicating my newfound wealth. After the initial shock wore off, I started thinking about all the things I could do with this money. There were so many options, so many opportunities. I could travel the world, buy a luxury yacht, and never work another day in my life. But that just didn't sit right with me. I wanted to do more, be more, make a difference in the world. So I started investing, pouring my wealth into startups that I believed in, donating to charities that were close to my heart. And it felt good, really good, to know that I was making a difference in people's lives. I felt like I was living up to my true potential, finally able to help those who needed it most. But then, just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, I fell in love. It was unexpected, but so incredibly real. She was smart, beautiful, and compassionate, everything I had ever wanted in a partner. And she loved me back. It was like a fairy tale, the kind of love story you only read about in books. But then, things took a dark turn. One night, as we were walking home from dinner, we were attacked by a group of thugs. They held us at gunpoint, demanding that we hand over our valuables. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my concealed carry weapon and shot one of the attackers, unaliving him instantly. It was a split-second decision, one that I knew would change my life forever. Now I find myself living in a world of fear, constantly looking over my shoulder. The media has been relentless in their coverage of the incident, and everyone seems to have an opinion on what I should have done differently. But I stand by my decision, even if it means I have to live with the consequences for the rest of my life. It's a small price to pay for the love of my life, and I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. And now, I'm left wondering what comes next. Will I be able to maintain my newfound wealth and status? Will my love for her continue to flourish? Or will the trauma of that night tear us apart? Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure. At this moment in time, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but right here, living this crazy, wild, unpredictable life. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm ready for whatever comes my way. I'm ready to take on the world with my newfound wealth and status, ready to make a difference in the world, ready to make the most of this incredible opportunity, ready to live the life of a billionaire. This is why the Israel-Palestine situation will have more of an effect than you think. Because the current Israel-Palestine conflict will have a turmoil snowball effect on other wars and conflicts happening around the globe. Think of it this way, while many countries and committees spend their time trying to decide justice and whom to allocate money to, that is time lost for help in the Ukraine-Russia war. This will cause thousands more to die while the battle is postponed. Moreover, Iran will have to join in this conflict, which will immensely change the grounds and possibility for Azerbaijan to try and take over Armenia. Already Azerbaijanis have unrightfully stepped foot and taken claim on Armenian ground, but without a local partner, and more attention going to another war, the effects could be disastrous. There is much worse that can happen though, but before we can talk about the future effects we have to understand the history, so here it is. The Jews had lived in ancient Israel until various empires conquered and expelled them. Each time they were allowed to return. The last iteration of that was the Roman Empire, which first started to conquer the province of Judea in 63 BC. The Jews had a belief that there was only one God, Yahweh, and that to worship any other god was a sin. The Romans had a political practice to impose the Roman emperor as a god to worship. For the other regions they conquered where the people there believed in multiple gods, this wasn't too big of an issue. However, I'm sure you can see why this is an issue for the Jews. Tensions kept rising. The Jews fought several wars of independence, which partially received renewed vigor through Jesus' preachings and activities, but the Jews didn't have a chance against the mighty Roman Empire. Eventually the Romans got fed up and started to expel the Jews from Judea, a process that took the span of several decades starting roughly in 100 AD. This was the final time it happened. During medieval times, fast forward to the 600s AD. In the Arabian Peninsula, the Prophet Muhammad receives a vision from God and founds the religion of Islam. Over the course of the following decades, the Arabs conquer vast swathes of North Africa and the Middle East, slowly converting these populations to Islam and Arabizing their cultures and peoples. We have three religions that now share the same root. They trace back their spiritual lineage to Abraham, a key religious figure in the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. Meanwhile, Jews living in the now Christian kingdoms of Europe are excluded from many professions and crowded into small corners of cities called ghettos or plots of undesirable rural land called shtetls. At best they would be tolerated, at worst they would be expelled and massacred. In the 1600s, two large Jewish populations eventually made their way to two places, the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, or the area of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, modern-day Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltics. These Jews are called the Sephardic and Ashkenazim Jews respectively. There are also Mizrahi Jews in the Muslim world that experience similar treatment. They'd sometimes be accepted and sometimes would be persecuted. Industrial era. After the French Revolution and the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, Europe started to experience a surge in nationalist movements. No longer were people subjects of a king, they now saw themselves as citizens of a country. But this also meant that many people saw that their countries were only for their own people. France was only for the French, Russia was only for the Russians, etc. Anti-Semitism and hatred against Jews intensified during this time, especially in the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which had been split between Russia, Austria, and Prussia, the predecessor state to Germany. In France there was the Dreyfus Affair, in which a French Jewish army officer was wrongly accused of treason and put on trial. In Russia, the Jews that lived in Eastern Europe were routinely expelled by the Russian Tsars, in which the Russian secret police would go to select villages and towns to terrorize the Jewish populations there and expel them in events known as pogroms. A lot of Jews, especially Ashkenazim Jews, immigrated to the US, Britain and its colonies, or Latin America to escape persecution. However, one Jew named Theodor Herzl had an idea: instead of being outsiders in a country constantly at the majority's mercy, what if the Jews had their own country? What if they could reclaim the promised land of Judea that had been taken from them so long ago? In the 1880s, he forms a movement to return to the Promised Land, Zionism, and organizes voyages and settling expeditions to Judea, called Aliyahs, now the province of Palestine in the Ottoman Empire. At first, this wasn't an issue. But as more Jews came, and as the Arabs also had nationalist movements to establish a free nation from the rule of the Ottoman Turks, the Arabs and Jews started to slowly come to a head. The World Wars. The Ottoman Empire joins World War I in 1915 on the side of Germany, Central Powers, who are fighting the UK, France, and Russia, the Entente. Britain owns Egypt at this time, so a war front begins there. The British and French start sponsoring an Arab rebellion against the Ottomans. The Entente powers promise the Arabs that they will have their own country if the Entente wins the war. The Central Powers lose the war and the Ottoman Empire is carved up in a peace treaty. However, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour makes a public declaration in 1917 that Britain would support a Jewish state in Palestine. The British and French also have a secret agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, in which they would divide the Ottoman territories of the Middle East amongst themselves. The British essentially promised Palestine to the Arabs, the Jews, and themselves, making a promise they couldn't keep. The Arabs are understandably pissed and feel betrayed. They start launching a rebellion against the British and the French, but this rebellion is crushed. Meanwhile, Jews hear the Balfour Declaration and are excited to believe that the British support their claim to the Promised Land, so they start immigrating to the now British Mandate of Palestine in large numbers. This is especially important since the US, Brazil, and many other countries start closing off their countries to Jewish immigration. The Arabs see this as a colonialist ploy to replace the Arab population in Palestine with a loyal Jewish population, and so start fighting with the Jews that are settling in Palestine. Multiple violent conflicts break out over the 1920s and 1930s, heightened by both Jews and Arabs forming their own militias. In 1936, the violence in Palestine is too much for the British to handle, so they close off Palestine to further Jewish immigration to appease the Arabs. At the same time, Germany has elected the Nazis into power. Nazi Germany starts World War II and starts conquering vast swathes of Europe. Jews are desperately trying to flee, but no country will take them and Jewish refugees are sometimes deported back into Nazi hands. When the Nazis invade the Soviet Union and conquer vast portions of Eastern Europe, they suddenly control land where many Jews live and decide to implement the Holocaust in full. Eventually, Nazi Germany is defeated, but the Nuremberg trials display these crimes for the world to see. However, the Jews are convinced that Europe will never accept them, especially since pogroms are still happening in Europe after the war. So now that we know that we can clearly see that this isn't very black and white, obviously this attack from Israel has unalived people and therefore cannot be characterized as anything but wrong. However, we can't decisively make wrong or right claims because it is a very complicated situation. What do you think? When did you regret forgiving someone? I don't have roommates anymore. We were on again / off again roommates for years. I let her move in with me when she needed to clean up and supported her when she didn't have a job. I followed her here to Los Angeles. She did the same type of thing for me. I landed on her couch, got sick, I had no job or insurance. I would have been on the streets if it wasn't for her. She kept me safe and fed. She introduced me to people, dragged me out to shows and parties, even when I was wrapped up in my bullshit and a big drag to be around. Lest you think it was a romantic relationship, it wasn't. It seemed like it might be for a minute. Doesn't matter. We were a couple. With a decade of this history, you'd think we'd still be lifelong friends. We were fun, and we complemented each other. I'm a thorough blitz cleaner, she was good at daily maintenance. I enjoy making elaborate meals for fun. She made sure there was always something healthy around to grab at short notice. I always thought these differences were what made us work. I don't know what happened. She'd always had an angry side, I didn't see it. I assumed she was letting off steam. Then one day she started putting me down. I blew it off, but it escalated. I got on her nerves, and she started picking at me with nasty passive-aggressive criticism. I couldn't do anything right. She had a lot of rules. Everything in her house was slightly broken and needed to be finessed to function. I fixed what I could and replaced whatever I couldn't repair. I don't like petty hassles or stupid rules. This pissed her off for some reason. I was estranged from my boyfriend / husband / whatever and I had a casual thing going with a guy. I started spending most of my time at his house because my living situation was uncomfortable. I'll admit I was secretive about this relationship. It wasn't serious. He was an asshole. She wouldn't approve. It was my business. I was less than 2 years clean, and I disappeared for days at a time with no explanation. I don't blame her for jumping to conclusions. She kicked me out without notice for using drugs. What stung was she had a bunch of big guys around to watch me the day I moved my stuff out, in case I stole something or made a scene. I've never made a scene in my life. I avoid fights. I didn't steal even when I was on drugs. Keep in mind, we were women in our 30s with professional careers. This was ludicrous. I had a 1962 Ford Fairlane for sale. I didn't have a place to park it because I didn't have a home. I asked her to move it every few days to avoid racking up parking tickets, and I paid her, I don't know, $50? For her time. I called to check on the car, and she hadn't moved it in 2 weeks. I asked her to check, and she said she couldn't. She was too high on mushrooms. Okay, I got kicked out because she didn't trust me after 10 years of friendship, and she didn't move my car because she was on drugs. I cut her out of my life. A few years passed. My life was going well, and I missed my friend. She reached out, and we went out to dinner. It was fun. She texted me the next day, and it took me a while to get back to her. I was busy, it should have been no big deal. I'll always respond, eventually. I must have broken some rule because 6 hours later I got a message so full of venom it hurts my heart to this day. I haven't seen her for 5 years. Friendship over. I regret letting her back in my life. It's better if I never see her again. My girlfriend became a pro-Trump Christian, so I broke up with her. I know I did the right thing by leaving, but I'm still feeling so blindsided and heartbroken by the way everything panned out. I am 28 years old, and I was with my most recent ex for almost 3 years. I thought she would be the woman I would marry, and for the majority of our relationship, she was my ideal partner. We met when we were both about to graduate from the same university, and I fell for her instantly. Her name was Kara, and before all this happened, she was the most thoughtful, kind person I knew, but all that's changed now. We had been dating for about 2.5 years when I got a call at work from Kara's parents letting me know she had been in a bad car accident, but she had survived. It was one of the scariest moments of my life, and before they told me she was alright, I thought the worst had happened to her. When I got to the hospital, Kara gave me a weak smile from her hospital bed where she was hooked up to a bunch of tubes. She looked okay other than a couple of bruises and scratches, but the doctor said she had sustained a fair amount of internal bleeding and she needed to stay at the hospital for a couple of days while they got it under control. I used all my PTO at work so I could stay by Kara's side the entire time she was there, but unfortunately, her parents also stayed. For context, Kara's parents are typical hyper-religious, pro-Trump Southerners, and we never really got along because of how vocal they are about their hateful beliefs. Kara's mom would literally just read her Bible verses all day to the point where I could barely speak to Kara when she was awake. Anytime she was awake, and her dad was around, he would just go on and on about how she needed to thank God for sparing her. By the time she left the hospital, I had more than enough of them. I had known Kara's parents were like this before she went into the hospital, but Kara had always said she never really found any meaning in her family's religion, and she wasn't religious herself. Well, I guess her near-death experience changed that, or maybe it was her parents' influence on her while she was recovering, but after Kara had been home for about a week, she told me she needed to confess something to me. She had such a serious look on her face, and I noticed she had a brand new Bible in her hands as she spoke to me. She said that she had seen the light when the car first hit her, and Jesus had chosen to spare her, and now she needed to devote her life to his in return. I asked her if she was serious, and she just quoted the Bible to me and nodded her head. She said she needed to devote her life to God, and she hoped I would support her and stick by her side. I was a little taken aback by all this, and even though I had never seen her act like this, I tried my best to be supportive in the beginning. But I had no idea how much Kara was about to change everything in her life. She started out by throwing away, not donating, but literally throwing away her entire closet and replacing it with conservative, old lady clothing. Then she started going to church multiple times a week and spending basically all her free time there volunteering and attending services. I felt like I barely saw her anymore. When I did see her, I would try to plan dates just as I always had, but the only thing she wanted to talk about anymore was God and his love and how she wanted me to find the light. She was constantly asking to pray for me, and I guess she had no idea just how much she was using up my patience. She had even started watching Fox News like her parents and complaining about the woke left and their deviance from God's will. It all boiled over one day when Kara came home from work and found me crying in my bedroom. I had just got off the phone with one of my siblings, and they had told me that my aunt, whom I had been very close with, had just lost her battle with cancer. I was heartbroken, and I knew everyone in my family was hurting. My girlfriend sat next to me and put her arm around me, but when I told her what happened, without missing a beat, she said, "Well, that was God's plan, and who are you to question his will?" That was the last straw for me. I jumped up and told her not everything was about effing God, and sometimes things were just SHD in life. I told her I missed the old her, and I felt like I was living with a stranger ever since she got home from the hospital. She told me I sounded like a sinner, and I just hated her for waking the righteous path. I saw that the person I once loved was gone, and that I was basically talking to a walking Bible instead of a real person anymore. I told her we were finished, and she started curing me out using less than holy words. It was a messy breakup, and she tried to tell all of our mutual friends that I left her because I hated God. Sure, F it, whatever, I hate God, and I hate her for what she let herself turn into. What is the most shameless thing you have ever seen a teacher do? I had a grade 1, first year of school, teacher, Mrs. Van Tonder. I still remember her name after all this time. I'm 34. I have always been a talker, and even as a child I asked a lot of questions about everything. I would ask my fellow classmates questions about their lives, and the teachers about teaching and school in general. I have also been an eater in class. I didn't know it at the time, but I have low blood sugar, so I have to eat regular, small meals/snacks, so I can function. On the first day in her class, I was transferred to her class in the middle of the year, but at the same school, I learnt that she hated two things: talking and eating. Her class was always so quiet because the children knew they would get into trouble if they spoke. I couldn't help it, I wanted to know stuff and to ask my friends about their day. After the third or fourth time she caught me speaking and eating in her class, she moved my desk to the front of the class, next to her desk, facing the students. This was to teach me a lesson about rules. I was too scared to tell my parents because I was 5 and I thought I might have deserved this because of my actions, so I thought I might get into trouble at home too. I should have known my parents wouldn't have thought like that, but I was young and terrified of my teacher. Whenever we had parents' evening, the teacher would move my desk back into its original spot so she wouldn't have to explain to my parents what she was doing. This went on until the end of the school year. I think I was transferred in July, until I left her class. I told my parents about it then and my mom wanted to have her fired. The principal said that she was old and she wouldn't get another job, so they had to keep her on. My mom insisted that she wouldn't teach me. She taught grade 2s sometimes too, and the principal said fine. I saw her in the halls after that and she never forgot that I nearly got her fired. If possible, she looked even more miserable than when I was in her class. My husband is cheating on me with my school bully. I just can't believe that he could fool me. His affair started 6 months ago. I could trace it 6 months back anyway. It could have been longer. There were no signs, no indications, no change of behavior, no change in the bedroom. I just found out by accident 3 weeks ago when his phone was on the nightstand. My husband was sleeping with my high school bully. I grew up in a small town and this woman bullied me severely in middle and high school. After graduation I did everything to find a job in a bigger city and moved, leaving all the hurtful memories. I worked hard for a year, found an apartment, bought a car and later started college. That's where I met my husband. We got married 2 years ago. I'm 8 weeks pregnant. He doesn't know yet. I will tell him eventually, don't worry. When I was in college my bully reached out to me after we bumped into each other in a party. She was new in town and was glad she saw a familiar face. She never acknowledged what she did and I never confronted her. I didn't want to open old wounds, however I wasn't going to befriend her, so I just rebuffed any attempt of reconnecting. She still moved in the same crowd as my husband and me. I never told my husband anything about her or our past. I wasn't even sure he knew her by name. 3 weeks ago, when my husband was in the shower he got a notification on Messenger. I thought it was odd since he's not been active on Facebook or Messenger in ages. We know each other's codes, so I looked and there was her name and pictures telling him she missed his PP. I scrolled a few messages back and there was a full conversation. I felt sick and my eyes went blurry, so I just left the phone back where it was and acted like nothing. Over the next 2 weeks I looked in his phone whenever I could. I found out that my husband deleted Messenger when he didn't use it, except for the time he forgot. I started doing the same. Whenever he's sleeping, playing games or out for a run I took his phone and installed Messenger. I could trace back their relationship 6 months. They've been sleeping together for 4. A lot of graphic description of what they want to do or have done to each other, but also a lot about me, although it was often one-sided. It's always my bully asking questions and trying to get answers about me, and my husband either reluctantly answering or outright telling her not to talk about me. But they've discussed my intercourse life and apparently I'm vanilla. To her constant questions about if he preferred me better he answered that it's different and he doesn't want to compare. Discussions about me often ended in him getting irritated and stop answering for days. I have never cried my whole life combined compared to these last few weeks. I want to leave my husband but I don't want to tell him why. I don't want to give him or my bully the satisfaction of knowing that they hurt me. I just want to ask for divorce and just tell him that I wasn't in love with him anymore and that I'm not happy in our marriage. It won't be lying, technically, because he's not the man I loved and I'm not happy in our marriage. I haven't told anyone what I've found out, but I've told my mom that I want to leave my husband and stated the reasons above. She went berserk. This is so out of the blue and moronic, and the first question she asked was whether I was cheating on him or not. This was a preview to what probably everyone else will think and say, but honestly I would rather live with being the perpetrator than the victim this time. I just can't let that be hurt me again, watch me suffer and enjoy it. I just can't. I know I'm being irrational right now, but please put yourself in my shoes and tell me what you would do in my stead. Is now posted go. My husband is cheating on me with my school bully. I have broken the news to my husband that I'm leaving him. I had already talked to my friends about it and being unhappy in my marriage seemed good enough reason for them to support me. One of them offered me her place until I find my own. I got really emotional and hugged her and cried because that meant that I could leave my husband's apartment now. He was shocked when I told him. I don't think he took me seriously at first, but he asked me if he did something wrong. I told him that I'm simply not happy with him and I think I'm still too young to waste my life in an unhappy marriage. He said he had noticed me being distant this past month, but never would he have guessed I was unhappy with him. He begged me to tell him what's wrong because this can't be it. He believed me, however, when my friend came to take me with her. This was Thursday. He has been calling multiple times a day but I haven't answered. He showed up this morning to my friend's house and begged me to have breakfast with him. I agreed. He looked like he hasn't slept or shaved since I asked for divorce. I told him that I was pregnant and that I'm keeping it, but he didn't have to be a part of its life if he didn't want to. His phone was on the table and he got a notification from Messenger. So he had forgotten to delete the app before meeting me. When I saw her name, I told him, "Oh. Is that her name? You know, she used to bully me in school back when we both lived in town." He froze. "Oh, haven't I told you about her?" I told him everything she did and how it affected me. How she never apologized about anything. He was silent the whole time and just looked at me. I ended it with, "Be careful with her. I don't think she's changed much, to tell you the truth." He grabbed my arm and just watched my face like he wanted to see if I knew something. "My plan is to buy a small apartment because that's all I can afford right now. A one-bedroom is enough until I have my baby and it's old enough to need its own room. I can upgrade later when I've saved more. I'm not leaving this city. I've spent my best years here and have the greatest memories. I have my friends around me and hopefully they will still be supporting me when the divorce is a fact. I have already filed for divorce, but he's probably going to ask for thinking period. I'm not in a hurry though. Everything will get better. For now I want to cry, try to get over him and heal and be there for my baby."
Found out my dad isn't my real dad and that I'm the product of my mom cheating. My dad approached me and told me him and my mom were divorcing. He wouldn't tell me why, but I kept pressing him and then he eventually told me the truth. I wasn't his daughter and the result of my mom having an affair with another man. Apparently he always had his suspicions, but his suspicions were confirmed after mom blurted out the truth to him one night when they were arguing. My mom also confessed to me about who my real dad is after I approached her. I hate my mom so much. She was disloyal and lied to my dad for years. How could she do this? And to me? To bring me into such an effed up situation like this? I hope when my parents divorce she ends up with nothing. She deserves nothing. She's a disgusting human being. Thank you for listening to my rant.
Is the most disturbing fact about the human body. Your butthole and your mouth originate from the same cell grouping during development, but the butthole cells form first, then the mouth cells from them. That means your mouth is from your butt. Your immune system doesn't know your eyes exist. If it did, it would attack them and make you go blind. The brain chemistry is stable enough to last thousands of years if not diseased. It's the rest of the body that kills us. You develop cancerous cells every day, but your immune system deals with it. Usually, you make and swallow between 1 and 2 liters of saliva every day. The brain will protect itself even if it means misery to you or death. Inhaling smoke in the middle of a burning house. Brain will make you stop breathing and pass out. Stuck in the middle of a cold place, you will fall asleep to conserve energy and never wake up again. Does your brain need more oxygen? You faint in the middle of a busy road. Had your leg torn off by a bear? Here's adrenaline so you can save your brain even if there's a huge risk of infection or further injury. Is your brain experiencing too much stress? It will make you drink alcohol or resort to drugs. You and your brain work together most of the time, but when push comes to shove, you are sacrificed. Sneaking out at 3 a.m. isn't the smartest thing to do. My friend lived in a super rural, small, country town and I had come to spend the summer with her at her grandparents' house. We were both about 13 at the time. We are now both 22, and thought it'd be a good idea to sneak out and walk around the town, maybe stop by the park. As we were walking down this one road, about 30 minutes after we left the house, we noticed somebody following us, wearing all black with a hoodie. We both got pretty creeped out and quickly rounded a corner before hiding in the dark of some bushes. After the guy passed us and we waited about another 30 minutes, we decided we should probably head back to her house, so we ran there. Once we got back inside, we couldn't really go to sleep, so we did an all-nighter. The next morning, we see on the news that someone was stabbed, assaulted, and killed on the exact road we had been on that night, and we couldn't help but wonder if the attacker was the man who had been following us. Safe to say we didn't sneak out again after that. Am I the jerk for pretending not to recognize my parents when they tried to reconnect? I was raised mostly by my uncle and aunt. My older sister developed a serious illness when I was 6 and my parents decided that they couldn't care for both of us, I guess, so they kind of unceremoniously dumped me at my grandparents and my uncle took me in. Didn't even explain to me what was going on, just you're going to go visit Gran for a while and never picked me back up. My grandparents and uncle explained it later, and they were pretty livid at my parents. I've seen my parents maybe 5 times since then and not at all for the last 9 years. I decided to stop having contact with them when I was 12 and since I was the only one reaching out all communication broke down. It turned out okay. I love my aunt and uncle and it turns out they can't have kids so they've always said I'm their miracle kid. I was just misrouted by the stork at first. I was formally adopted by them when I turned 18. I wish it had been earlier but there were some red tape things that would have made that really expensive and difficult. I'm 21 now. My sister passed away between Thanksgiving and Christmas and I made a trip back from school for the funeral, but I stayed in the back and left before my bio parents could talk to me. They called my uncle to try to talk to me, but I said I didn't want to so he told them that I wasn't available at the moment. They finally caught up to me over Christmas when I went to midnight mass with my gran, and approached me and tried to give me a hug. I did recognize them, but I pretended not to and just backed off and said sorry, do I know you? They said we're your parents. And I said my parents are at home. And went and sat down with my gran. They sat behind us and I could just feel the stare, and on the way out they were like you really don't recognize us? And I said oh, are you my dad's brother? I think I remember you from when I was little. My gran thinks they deserved it trying to come back to me like nothing happened, but they wrote me a long letter about how hurt they are and how I should understand that they were trying to do the right thing and how they'll always be my parents and I can't change that. Other family members think I was too harsh as they're grieving, but I don't think they should get a pass just because they remembered me now that my sister is gone. What is the craziest thing that happened to you while babysitting? When I was 16, I decided to babysit for my mom's friend while they went out and partied. So I went to their house and looked over the two seventh graders. They were both boys and I just told them just to not do anything crazy so I didn't have to tell their mom anything. While they told me to enjoy the house and do whatever I wanted to do, I went in her bedroom and started to try on her clothes because I was bored. I ended up putting on a whole outfit with this cool green dress and some pantyhose and some nice heels, then chill out on the living room couch. So I go watch some YouTube videos and they came out of their room and said they were hungry, so I ordered some pizza. The pizza got here and they had a rule not to eat in their room, so they ate in the living room with me. Me and them weren't strangers, so it wasn't awkward. I was watching a show and in the show someone gets kidnapped, so while we're eating food and on our phones there's just a girl duct taped up on the TV. One of them spoke up and said that looks easy to get out of, and to be fair it wasn't that much duct tape. The other one said, I think you underestimate the power of duct tape. I chimed in and said, y'all got any duct tape, we can test this theory. They said that they knew where multiple rolls are, and after pizza we all decided to do some duct tape escape. So we put the food away and get the duct tape and I taped them both up only at their wrists and ankles. I didn't do a lot and I was hoping that one of them would be like make it harder than I fully two him up. Well, they both eventually got out and they wanted to do a level 2, so I taped their wrists and ankles, then their knees, and then I taped their already taped wrists to their body, then taped their elbows to their body, then I put tape over both of their mouths. So I told them that if they were able to get out of this, I'll let them tape me up. Their time limit was until my movie was done, so about an hour and a half give or take. Well, they usually people give up, but they both were going 100% the entire time. Well, they started making progress and before the movie was done they were both out of the tape. I was shocked, but I kept my word and allowed them to tape me up. They were excited and I was too, in a sense. I asked them before we started if they were going to gag me and they said yes, so I said, why don't I gag myself so I know I won't die? They said this was fine and I went and did that. I decided to take my pair of panties I was wearing off and put on their mom's silk ones, then put back on the pantyhose. I then used my panties as the gag and shoved it in my mouth, then I taped my mouth shut and walked back in the living room. They asked me to say a sentence and after I mumbled through the gag they decided it was good enough. So then they started taping me up and they didn't understand what comfort was and were just doing it as tight as possible. So one taped my arms behind my back as hard as possible and I already knew based off that I wasn't getting out. Then the other one taped my ankles hard and my knees and taped the dress to me at my thighs. After this they contemplated what to do and after looking up some other photos they decided to tape my shoulders and elbows to my body, then they took a break. Eventually they came back after 5 minutes and taped my wrists to my body and then bent my knees and taped my ankles to my thighs in a makeshift hog tie. They then said, how much time do we give her, and the one who started all this said an hour and a half just like us. They then watched me struggle for a while and then one of their friends called them and they asked them what they were doing and they said nothing right now, and they asked them if they wanted to play video games. It was a Friday night around 8 p.m. and they just went to their room and started playing video games. Well, an hour goes by and I didn't make any progress and was just stuck in the floor unable to get up. Well, they forget about me and end up staying in their room for the rest of the night. They had a mini fridge and snacks and a bathroom in their room, so they had literally no reason to get out their room. So their door was open and I really had to pee and poop. So I start to roll and move my way over to their room. So after 30 minutes I finally get there and one of them sees me and said, oh my gosh, we forgot about you, and he said he'd help me and he cut the hog tie, then told me good look and pushed me outside his room and locked the door. So now I really have to pee and poop, so I make my way to the parents' bedroom, close the door and lock it with my phone in my hand, then I get to their bathroom all by hopping and in heels. I really could have hurt myself. Then finally get to the restroom and then I find out that he literally duct taped the dress onto me. So now I'm panicking, first trying not to poop while in pantyhose and trying to free myself without falling over. So he was smart and ended his tape in front of me, so I started digging the tape into the corner of the sink counter and thankfully for me it stuck to the counter, so I rolled it off slowly, then I pulled up my dress and pulled down the pantyhose and panties and sat down on the toilet and was relieved. I managed to pull my panties back up in the pantyhose, then put my skirt down and started to think about how to get out. So I first dug my arms in the counter but then looked for something to cut it and I was unsuccessful at first, but then went to her desk and saw some scissors. I then successfully cut myself out of the arm binder and the leg tape I had on the breast bondage still and eventually go out. Then I took a nice kind hot bubble bath and after I went to bed. My husband hasn't loved me since our son was born. It's like he thinks he can say hurtful things to me without any consequences. Having our baby boy was planned, and he said he was okay with it, but now I wonder if he was lying all along. Our son is 2 years old now, and I've felt so alone in our marriage. All the happiness and warmth that I felt from him when we were dating is gone. I've been dealing with diastasis recti and struggling with my weight. I'm 5 feet 6 inches and weigh 255 pounds. We met before the pandemic, and I was 230 pounds at the time. When the pandemic hit, I ended up eating a lot of junk and fast food, and by our wedding day, I weighed 250 pounds. I made some efforts to lose weight and managed to shed 5 pounds, but just 2 weeks after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I know I'm heavy, but I was at this weight when we met, when he proposed, and when we got married. After our baby was born, I had just 6 pounds left to lose to get back to my pre-wedding weight, and I did it. Also, it's not like I trapped him and then let myself go, either. In fact, to my knowledge, he's gained more weight than I have. He's been acting cold and rude to me for 2 years, and he doesn't seem to care that I'm unhappy with how he treats me. He thinks I should just accept the lack of affection, warmth, intimacy, and companionship without complaining because bringing up these issues and not allowing him to ignore me is being negative. This past weekend, after a miserable trip and a panic attack, he chose that moment to tell me that I look like I weigh 400 pounds and that he's not attracted to me anymore. When we got home, I told him to move out. As we walked into the house with our bags, I started taking down all his artwork from the walls and packed away all our pictures together. I don't know if I'm wrong, but I can't help feeling hurt by his cruelty. Should I let him go, or is this just my vanity speaking?
Sailors, what's the creepiest, scariest, or most unnerving thing you've seen witnessed while at sea? I worked on tugboats for about 6 years. The back deck is considered a wet deck, meaning it isn't unusual for it to be underwater at times. We were making tow with an oil rig at sea with waves that were 14 to 16 and one hit us just right, taking my coworker George and pulling him out to sea. Now it's 3 a.m. and pitch blacked out. This is nearly always means death. About 20 seconds later, which felt like an eternity, another wave brought George back on deck, plopping him safely on his ass right next to the winch. George laughed and got right back to work without missing a beat.
What made you walk out of a date? She was blackout drunk before I got there. Back in college I was going on a date with this girl. She wanted me to meet her at her sorority house when I got off work around 8. I go there, she is blackout drunk on a couch and wanted to cuddle. I hadn't had anything to drink, so I just left. The next day she asked me why I never showed up. We didn't talk anymore. Took a gal to Starbucks, bought us both a drink so we could sit and talk. About 5 minutes into it she takes a phone call from a coworker, puts it on speakerphone and begins to savagely crap talk everyone the two work with. On speakerphone, in a small semi-busy Starbucks, both parties cussing up a storm. The barista at the counter asked her to take the call off speaker as people were trying to study. They were, and she proceeds to argue with the barista about how she can't take it off speakerphone, blah blah blah. I instantly got up and apologized to the barista on my way out of the store. Didn't message her, didn't hear from her. I went on a date a few years ago and this was a girl I met on Tinder, before it became a god-awful app. I was seated next to the bar and I was chatting with the bartender before my date had arrived and let her know I was waiting on someone for a first date. When my date arrived we sat in the same spot. We ordered dinner and it was apparent to me right off the bat she only cared about herself. After about 15 minutes of my date talking without asking a single question, I decided I was going to let this entertain me and see how long this could go on. It was 2 hours and 15 minutes later, no exaggeration, where she still hadn't asked me a single question. When she got up to go to the bathroom, the bartender came over and said, "I'm covering your tab, now get out of here and next time you come in we'll have a laugh about this date of yours." So, I got up and left. My date had then proceeded to send me nasty texts for the next couple of days. Apparently the restaurant still charged her for her drink/meal. I never did go back and chat with that bartender though, wish I had. I oversaw her texting her friend referring to me as a free dinner, so I took her to the crappiest, dirtiest greasy spoon type place I could find and played the most uptight cheapskate asshole possible until she walked off. Then I went to my favorite Korean place. She had just come back from the bathroom, sat down and said, "I think black people should have different bathrooms." So I excused myself to the bathroom and left. I went on a date with a girl that brought her sister along. She didn't mention she would bring her. Went to a pub and got a drink, sat down next to this girl who was her sister, which they just talked to each other. Then her sister got a call from a friend which she said to join them. 2 minutes later her friend turned up. This was in the space of 5 minutes and I had just brought a drink, so wanted to finish it but felt it was too weird. Got up to leave and they asked if I could buy both the girls drinks. I said sure, went round to the bar and then just walked out. Didn't feel like I needed to explain myself.
My boyfriend put a girl through the same trauma I went through. When I was 18 I gave my V card up to a much older gentleman I trusted. He told me he would take care of me and took advantage of the fact I was young and naive. I was coming out of a history of abusive relationships and wanted to experience intimacy on my own terms. I also didn't want to hit 19 without having intimacy. This older gentleman was a co-worker of mine and I really trusted him as he seemed very open and told me he wanted to pursue something with me, and me being vulnerable and infatuated I agreed. We slept together and right after he blocked me everywhere. It made me lose a lot of trust in people, and I was very afraid of being used for a lot of years. Cut to recently, my boyfriend and I have been dating for a year and we've had a few problems but nothing we haven't been able to work through. I knew he had a questionable history as well, being beyond highly promiscuous in college. Additionally, I knew he had cheated 4 times in the past on his exes. All of this was workable as it was months before I met him and he had been cheated on, giving him what I thought was perspective and reason to change. We haven't had such problems, however recently things have been rough, to the point where I had to look through his phone with him sitting beside me. There, I found a less workable piece of his past. Towards the end of his 3rd year at college he had started talking to a 16-year-old. He knew this girl worshipped the ground beneath his feet, and so he led her on. Told her how special she was. First date he took her V card, then he ghosted her. She called and texted him for weeks asking why he was doing this, why he used her, what she did wrong. Feelings I was familiar with. In all the texts he gave no signs of being uninterested. This was a few months before we met. His best friend had mentioned her previously, referring to her as the obsessive ex, but I don't think he knows the full story. I won't tell him, but I don't know how to handle this information.
Accidentally finding out my biological brother is my dad. I was going through some old family photo albums, reminiscing about the good old days. And as I was flipping through the pages, I stumbled upon a photo of my brother and my mom. There was an undeniable intimacy in the way they posed together, something that struck me as unusual. Considering the significant age difference between my brother and me, as well as the fact that our mother had him at the age of 16, I estimated him to be around 20 years old in this particular picture. As I came across a few more photos of them in similar poses, a thought emerged in my mind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to confront my mom about it. With a mix of anxiety and anticipation, I approached the subject delicately, not knowing what to expect. To my astonishment, my mom confirmed my suspicions. My brother was, in fact, my biological father. As the shock settled in, my mind raced with questions. How did this happen? How did they keep this a secret? There were so many emotions swirling within me: confusion, anger, sadness, betrayal, and even a tinge of relief that the truth was finally out. It turns out that when my mother was younger, she had an affair with someone she knew. That someone happened to be her own son, my brother. Overwhelmed by guilt and societal expectations, they made the difficult decision to keep their secret hidden for years, hoping to protect the family from the repercussions of their actions. Needless to say, this revelation has shaken our family to its core. I am utterly disgusted by the fact that my own mother, whom I believe to be loving and caring, would engage in an inappropriate relationship with her own son. Therapy sessions have become a regular occurrence, helping us navigate the emotions and rebuild our relationships, but I feel so disgusting now knowing I was a product of incest. Ida for being mean to my brother. I 33F live with my sister 29F. My brother 25M moved in with us a couple of years ago. Lately, my brother has been texting my mom and telling her I am mean to him and it hurts his feelings. Here's some context: my brother was in school getting his master's. Up until May of this year, he was a college athlete as well, so his schedule was pretty busy. Now, he is no longer in school, decided not to finish his master's or playing sports. He has no job and has not made much of an effort to look for one. He does have a part-time job coaching kids. Everyone in my family babies him because he is the youngest. I, however, do not, which makes me mean. My sister and I do not make him pay rent or utilities, only his food and snacks. I am not here to argue about that. He spends all of his money on shoes and weed. He then complains that there is no food in the house. My sister caters to him by making him food or giving him money to order something. I tell him to use his money, go to the grocery. When he does cook, he doesn't clean up after himself. He leaves stains all over the counter and stove, crumbs on the floor. If the dishwasher is clean, he refuses to empty it and instead stacks his dirty dishes in the sink. He will let the trash overflow and stack his garbage on top, never taking the trash out. He throws garbage into the recycling bin. I correct him on this, making me a bitch. Everyone else lets it slide. We live in a southern state of the US. It has been 100 degrees here without heat index. My brother doesn't close the front door all the way when he comes and goes. I have kindly at first told him that he needs to make sure the door is pushed shut all the way because he is letting all the cold air out. He still doesn't do it, which resulted in me flipping out. I work from home and I am about to start nursing school in a couple of weeks. He comes in during the day and night yelling on the phone, slamming doors, etc. I tell him to be quiet. He tells me to shut the F up. ETA he uses my sister's bathroom. I have the master and he shaves and leaves his hair clippings all over the place or throws them in the shower without rinsing it. My sister bitches to me about it, but doesn't tell him a thing, so he continues to do it. Now my family is texting me and telling me that I am mean and hurting his feelings and I need to be nicer. They tell me they know he is lazy and selfish, but I need to be nicer. Yes, it has gotten to a point that whenever I am around my brother, I roll my eyes. I have grown resentful of him, and I know I need work on that. But, I am tired of being the bad guy for telling him to act like a grown man. Am I being too uptight or does my brother need to grow up? Ida? Am I the a-hole for trying to comfort my grieving father? My mother died very recently of brain cancer. It was a total surprise to everyone in the family, since she was completely undiagnosed and hadn't reported any health problems in the first place. Needless to say, the whole family was grieving, and my father especially took it very hard. For me, it was a little bit different. I didn't like my mother at all. Growing up, she was always verbally abusive towards me, and always told me that I wasn't good enough no matter what I did. She belittled and made me cry regularly when I was a kid, and although that behavior never stopped when I got older, I learned to deal with it better and pretty much ignored her. My father was always at work, and although he never stopped her, he did comfort me when he could, and I don't really blame him for what happened. However, as soon as I went to college, I cut contact with my mother and didn't go back home until her funeral. Being at the funeral with a family I hadn't seen in years was a bit of a strange experience, but given the circumstances, everyone got over the awkwardness pretty quickly, and they were happy to have me back. Throughout the funeral, everyone did seem very upset. It was like no one knew how much of a terrible person she really was. Still, I didn't say anything about it until after the service, when my father and I were walking out together. He told me about how much he loved her, and said he had no idea how he would go on living without her. Wanting to be a good person, I invited him to live with me, before being honest with him and saying I wasn't really upset that she was gone, since she was always a terrible person anyway. That really upset my dad, who started yelling at me, saying I didn't know her at all, and finally just asked me to leave and not talk to him for a while. Am I the a-hole? Considering leaving my husband, despite his daily declarations of love. I 35F have been married to my husband 29M for almost 8 years now, but I feel like I can't waste more of my life being with him. He wants to keep fighting to save the relationship, but I don't feel like there is anything left to save. A little background: we were both raised in the same high control religion that didn't want us to be dating and tried to force us apart. I didn't feel like they had the right to do so, so I got rebellious and just eloped with him, as they can't separate a married couple. They did, However, disfellowship and shun us, meaning we lost all our friends and family contact, was minimal. I felt like it was my husband and I against the world and thought we would be strong together for having fought together to escape the religion and find our place in the Word. Things didn't quite work out like that. While I worked to process my feelings and put the past behind me, he got consumed with hate and was always complaining. For the first couple of years, I worked to provide for us while he was unemployed and gaming all day, not doing any household chores. We decided together that we both needed to get an education that would secure us financial freedom when we both got a decent paying job afterward. I worked hard on my education, where I had a paid internship and studied simultaneously. My husband, on the other hand, put in minimal effort in his studies and got several warnings about being kicked out because of low attendance. With only one semester left, he dropped out for mental reasons. This was also my last semester, and I now had the added stress of him dropping out, his breakdown, my grandmother dying, and my brother being terminally ill. It got so bad that I even broke down in front of my boss, crying because the pressure was so hard on me and I was getting so far behind. I didn't think I would make it. I am so grateful that I have an amazing boss who helped me so much and almost carried me through the rest of my study, so that I could graduate last summer and also gave me a full-time job at the same place right after. It is now almost 1.5 years ago since my husband dropped out, and he is still just home, doing nothing other than gaming, drinking, and sleeping. I had to drag him to a psychiatrist after he kept talking about harming himself. After a line of sessions and medical treatment, they say that he is no longer clinically depressed and recommended that he talk with a psychologist to work through past traumas and also get a job, because it would be good for him to get out of the house. He did none of that. He is just back to gaming, drinking even more and sleeping. During all of this, I have become more lonely in our marriage. When I told my husband about feeling so overwhelmed, like I couldn't breathe, he just accused me of piggyback riding on his depression to get attention. A few months ago, we had a big fight because I felt something he did was very inconsiderate. During the heat of it, he admitted that he was so embarrassed about my physical appearance that he had even canceled a gaming night at our place with some friends he met online. I was so disappointed. How dare he be embarrassed of me, the woman who has supported him for all these years and fought to get an education to give us a better life. While he, for the most part, has just been a lazy slob with a drinking problem, neither contributing to the household financially or by doing any chores. Ever since this argument, I have refused to tell him I love him and pulled away all affection. I was so hurt by this. I began thinking about how I would be better off alone than in a marriage with someone who tells me he loves me but does nothing to show it. To me, it feels like empty words. My brother recently died, and we buried him last week. My husband hates that this has resulted in me spending way more time with my family, who I had gone low contact on since we left the religion. Losing my brother kinda puts everything into perspective, and I think most of my family agrees that differences in opinion about religion and life choices shouldn't keep us apart. After the burial, my closest family was gathered in my family home. I don't know why my husband insisted on coming when he always says how much he hates my family including my brother, but I guess he wanted to look like a supportive husband. However, he drank way too much, enough for people to notice. On the way home, he started complaining about a joke my mother had made that he found very rude and talked about what a horrible woman she is. Then he started talking about how my dead brother probably had some child lover tendencies. I was so offended that he dared to talk about my brother that way on the day we effing buried him. When we got home he wanted to continue drinking, but I said that I thought he had enough. Then he got angry, complaining how he felt trapped in a loveless marriage and I couldn't even tell him I loved him. He set an ultimatum, saying that I had to say that I loved him or it was over between us. I didn't want to be pressured or threatened like that, so I just told him, so be it, and slept on the couch that night. The next day I go to work and stop on the way home to buy moving boxes, just to show him that I take this serious. He is in total disbelief. He calls his mother who comes over and tries to smooth things over and says we are so good together and we just need to talk out our differences. His mother is a wonderful woman, but I also know she of course does what is best for her son. He definitely needs me more than I need him, and without me it would again fall on his parents to take care of him, since he seems to be unable to do anything on his own. For the past week since this incident, he has been so nice and acting like nothing has happened. He keeps hugging and kissing me and telling me he loves me. Kinda feels like love bombing to convince me to stay, but I am still looking for an apartment, and my family is on standby to help me move whenever I find a place. I try not to confront my husband or reject him too harshly, just so that we can keep the peace while I plan my way out. I kinda feel like a bad person for leaving him while he is going through depression, but I also feel like 8 years is a long time to wait for him to figure out his shit. I feel like I'm pushing back my own issues because I need to be strong for both of us. I have always put everyone else's needs before mine, but I really just want to be selfish now for once in my life and take care of me. Thanks to anyone who has listened to my rant. I just needed to vent how I feel and maybe get other people's thoughts on it. I just feel like going crazy dealing with this on my own. TLDR, I want to leave my husband of 8 years because I feel like I do everything while he is being a lazy, not working and not doing any household chores, just letting me provide for him while he disrespects me. He wants us to fight for our marriage and tells me he loves me every day, but I feel like it is empty words when there is no actions behind it. Edit okay, I never expected that this many people would read and respond to my post. I try to read through every comment, and although I can't respond to everyone, I want you all to know that I am very grateful that you are taking the time to read my story and write encouraging words. Some has been asking about the comment my husband made about my late brother, and no, he doesn't know anything I don't. He often makes offensive comments about other people and especially minorities, and claim it is just a dark sense of humor. My brother and him always hated each other, so it's nothing new to make rude comments about him, but him being dead now and on the day we buried him should have made it obvious that it would be very inappropriate. The trauma my husband is working through is the religious trauma, same as me, and also low self-esteem from previous relationship.
I'm leaving my husband because of his pee addiction. My husband has a pee addiction. We've been together for 6 years and married for 4.5. We have 3 small children together. He didn't start out with this addiction. It seems to have developed during my last pregnancy. It was rough and extremely high risk for me. Because of how much pain I was in daily, I didn't really want to engage in lovemaking, which led to him watching pee daily. I hadn't realized the extent of the issue until a few months ago. This man has thousands of videos downloaded and saved to his desktop. He goes to these sites during work hours. On top of morning visits and night visits, he shirked his responsibilities with the kids to watch pee. We're also no longer making love because he would rather watch pee. His views on our relationship have become more incel-like as well, which is also concerning. My breaking point came this past weekend when he said that I was disgusting because I didn't look like the women in his videos. When I mentioned there's plus-sized and curvy girl videos, he said I was wrong and there wasn't any videos like that out there. The only women who make them are small with big chests. I then got petty and showed him pages upon pages of free bigger girl videos online. I've always been more curvy, and I'm not ashamed of that, but he can't come back from calling me disgusting. I'm done. I was willing to help him through this and try to save our marriage prior, not anymore. His addiction has invaded every aspect of our lives and he's still refusing to believe he has a problem. Maybe the divorce papers will wake him up. I just want him to get help for the kids' sakes. They deserve a dad who is invested in them.
Grindr users, what was your worst date? This might date me here, but I was browsing Craigslist personal ads. I was quite adventurous at that time, and I didn't have a boyfriend back then. So, I often looked for no strings attached hookups. I found a profile for a man only 3 years older named Brad who was looking for passionate hugging. He was cute, and if his dating profile was anything to go off of, we hit it off nicely. Since I couldn't host, we agreed to meet at a neutral location in my city's downtown area. When I got there, I saw him talking with a group of 5 other guys in our age bracket or so. I initially assumed they were his friends. Well, it was true to an extent. Curious, I asked who the other men were. He explained they were with him to also hook up, and the night's activities would involve a group. I thought at that moment, okay, not totally against this. I signaled that, while caught off guard, I would go along with them. We start walking in the opposite direction of where he'd said his car was parked. We are now walking through the far seedier section of our downtown's LGBT district. This place would have been sketchy to anyone, let alone to gay men. I asked what we were doing, and he said he was going to take a little bit to score some hard substances. He wanted to make it an unforgettable night. Red flag. Major red flag. I might have been only just comfortable with the group thing, but substances? No way. I said that I wasn't going to go through with it, and despite how much it would cost, I'd be taking a cab home. He grew dark, and grabbed me by the shirt. He said, I wasn't going anywhere. He said that, because we met, and there was evidence of our conversation that might be enough to get me brought up on charges should they get caught. I gulped, as this was really going south, and fast. Before much else could happen, over his shoulder, I saw a familiar face get out of a car. It was someone I'd fooled around with before named Ted. I saw my ticket out of there. I called out to Ted, and said, hey honey, you're here early. I wasn't expecting you for another couple of hours. Ted first looked very bewildered, but once we made eye contact he remembered who I was, and seemed to read I was in trouble. Ugh. I know, and I would have been able to give you more time, but the client's car broke down on the 5, or something. So, my boss sent me home early. Didn't you say you had a date with somebody? Is this him? Brad stammered, but just nodded that he was the guy I had intended to meet. Ted walked forward, and hugged me. Are you going to have fun? Ted asked. I replied, yeah, but can we stop by the house? I want to pick up a few things. This party's going to be wild, he agreed, and took me by the hand and led me back to his condo nearby. The next afternoon, my local news station reported that the very same group of men were busted for major substance violations. Everyone got arrested, not just the ringleader. They took everybody in while they sorted out who had actually committed a crime. My beautiful wife is jealous of her sister because she's prettier. She went ballistic when her ugly sister kissed me. My wife Jenna is absolutely gorgeous, but she has some really negative body image issues because of her sister Mary, who is very conventionally attractive, as opposed to Jenna's more unconventional, but striking beauty. Mary was a successful model until a couple years ago and now works in the fashion industry. In our early days of dating, when I would tell Jenna she's beautiful, she would always say, just wait until you see my sister. When I did finally meet her family, she would randomly press me for weeks to talk about her sister. She asked whether I thought Mary was more attractive than her. I always told her the truth, that I think Mary is attractive in a boring way, and that I think my wife is much more beautiful and interesting to look at. She wouldn't let it go until I confronted her about how uncomfortable it made me and asked her what was going on. This is when she told me that she always had a chip on her shoulder about her looks because of being compared with her sister all the time growing up. They fell into the classic smart one/pretty one dynamic their whole lives, with my wife being the smart one. She didn't like this and always wanted to be considered the pretty one. She also said Mary had a habit of being flirty with all of her exes, and warned me that it would happen to me eventually. She then started sobbing and begging me to not cheat on her with her sister, to which I said I would never cheat on her with anyone, especially her sister. I've been crazy about my wife since day one and there's literally no woman on earth who could come close to her. I honestly didn't believe her about the flirting at first. I assumed it was just an extension of her insecurity, but I was wrong. Whenever we get together with my wife's family, Mary always finds ways to touch me and make little innuendos/comments about me or my body. She rubs my biceps and talks about how huge they are. When I call her out on it, she laughs and says she just wants to know my workout routine. Everyone knows she's lying and it's super uncomfortable, especially for my wife. I've always called Mary out on it because I always want her to stop. She'll cool it for a while but eventually start doing it again. It's been 6 years of this, and every time it happens my wife is upset for days and I have to do a lot of reassuring. Now, this is where things get horrible for us. A few days ago we were at my mother-in-law's birthday party, and Mary asked me to help her grab some things from the garage. When I told her to get someone else to do it, because I didn't want to be alone with her, she said she needed a strong person to help her out. She even promised she wouldn't do anything. I hate that I went, I regret going, and I don't know why I went. I just never thought she would actually try to do anything. That possibility didn't exist in my head because at the end of the day, I'm married to her sister, which makes us family. I realize now that I should have seen this would happen eventually and should have permanently shut her down years ago. Well, as soon as we walked into the garage, she turned and pressed me up against the door with her whole body and started trying to kiss me. I immediately pushed her off and asked her what the F she was doing. She started giggling and saying she was just doing what we both have been thinking and kept insisting you know you want to. I told her she was out of her mind and ran out of there. I went straight to my wife and told her we were leaving. The whole ride home she was asking me what was wrong. I wasn't sure whether to tell her because I knew how much it was going to hurt, but I also thought Mary would probably try to spin it as me making a move on her, so I knew I had to just say it. I told her everything and she cried the whole way home. I felt awful. For the last several days Mary has been calling and texting my wife doing exactly what I thought she would do, even telling my wife that I said she, Mary, was the hottest girl I've ever seen, which I had to assure my wife a million times that I did not and would never say that because it's simply not true. My wife is the hottest girl I've ever seen. She's been a complete wreck the last several days. She's hardly eating. She pulls away from my touch when I try to hug her or just hold her hand. She says she feels hideous and disgusting. This is the lowest I have ever seen her, and it hurts to see how much she's hurting. I have no idea what to do to help her heal from this. What should I do? My beautiful wife is jealous of her sister because she's prettier. She went ballistic when her ugly sister kissed me. I told my wife that if she wanted to try to repair her relationship with her sister I would respect that, but that I don't feel comfortable being around her for the foreseeable future. I said Mary has obviously been deeply jealous of my wife her whole life because she is a hollow, ugly person whose entire value has an expiration date while my wife actually has substance. I told her that I think her whole family is toxic and has done nothing but put her down her whole life, but that only she can decide whether she still wants them in her life. I also told my wife that while I don't blame her for her emotional reaction, her insecurity is something that she needs to work on for our relationship to be healthy because I don't like being accused of finding her sister hot every 5 seconds. What Mary did was intimate assault and she's been sexually harassing me for years, but I have consistently put aside my own feelings about this problem because of how it affects her. That has prevented me from getting the support that I need to. I told her that her reaction only serves to punish herself and me for her sister's behavior, and there's no reason to give her that kind of power. The only people who have ever considered her second best are her and her family. Everyone else sees her for who she really is. She was crying the whole time and agreed that she needed to go to therapy to work on her insecurity. We were able to find a therapist who specializes in body image/self-esteem issues to work with her individually, and we're looking for a couples therapist too. My wife sent a message to her parents and sister that explained exactly what happened and told them she would reach out to them if she ever feels ready to repair their relationship. We blocked all of them everywhere, but Mary has of course been spamming my family and our friends with nonsense. Claiming I attacked her, I'm a substance addict, I abuse my wife, all kinds of BS that thankfully nobody believes. My wife is still down in the dumps, but I can see that things are getting a little better. She's eating, sleeping more, and she's cuddling with me in the mornings again, which is nice. Now I'm planning a surprise getaway for us this weekend. We're going to one of our favorite places and I'm going to wine and dine her to try to make her feel like the goddamn queen she is. Update, my wife loved the getaway weekend, we had a blast and by the end of it she said she felt like herself again. For a few days after we got back things were really quiet, so we were hopeful that Mary had finally given up, but I felt uneasy about it all. I had a feeling that Mary would try to interfere with my work, and while I initially dismissed it, I figured I would reach out to my boss just in case. I've been working at the same company for almost 10 years and she's heard me vent about Mary's intimate harassment before, so I didn't have to explain too much. My boss just reassured me that she knows my real character and would let me know if Mary tried anything. Well, she did. Mary did try to contact my boss a couple of days later. Apparently Mary said that I needed to be fired because I was a predator and claimed to have proof that I assaulted her. My boss said that was a very serious accusation to make and asked Mary to explain what proof she had. Mary claimed there was a camera that caught the whole incident, and my boss asked her to send the video. Then Mary got flustered and said the police had it, so my boss asked her to send over a copy of the police report. She said it had a lot of private information in it, so my boss asked her to redact the private information and send it over. Mary said she didn't feel comfortable with that, and my boss told her that she could not take action against an employee based on word of mouth from a stranger. She shouted at her about victim blaming. And hung up. Unfortunately that was not the end of it. Last Wednesday, Mary somehow sent an email from my personal email account with a PP pic, not mine obviously, to the entire office. My best guess is that I must have left my email logged in on one of my in-laws' devices. She's definitely not smart enough to actually hack me. And I know this is completely beside the point, but of course she chose the weirdest looking PP I've ever seen. I played team sports all my life, I've seen a lot of PPs, and this was something else. It's honestly kind of funny to think about Mary googling gross PP or something and sifting through hundreds of images to find just the right one. I had to apologize to everyone on staff and thankfully folks were surprisingly understanding. It's actually been kind of a nice bonding experience with my coworkers. Anyway, at this point it was clear we had to escalate things legally. I really wanted to avoid it but she forced my hand. My wife and I have a lawyer friend who helped us draft a cease and desist letter outlining her continued harassment and the material and emotional damage this is causing us. My wife then sent a message to Mary and my in-laws with a copy of the letter and made it very clear that we would pursue criminal and/or civil proceedings if her harassment continued. My wife's mom then called her crying and begged her to just let it go and leave Mary alone. My wife calmly explained that Mary is the only person responsible for this whole situation, and that their parents have always enabled her awful behavior. She also said something she later regretted but I think was pretty badass. Mary is going to stick you two in a nursing home and steal your money the minute she has the chance, and you deserve it. After the way her mom reacted, my wife is firmly settled on cutting off her family completely. This happened on Friday, and on Sunday Mary's best frenemy and sent my brother a message on Facebook to say Mary is going to leave us alone and to please not sue her. I told my brother not to respond, then just sat and enjoyed the idea that Mary was out there somewhere freaking out about the potential of having to actually face the consequences of her actions. It must be such a strange feeling for her. Since then, we haven't heard a peep from the grapevine. It feels like things are finally starting to go back to normal. My wife is starting therapy next week and will be starting couples therapy in a month. I'm so proud of her for standing up for herself with her family and finally putting her mental health and well-being first.
My mother-in-law deliberately poisons my daughter with an allergen and threatened to unalive herself, so we reported her to the police. My mother-in-law is super obsessed with my daughter. This is our only child and mother-in-law's only grandchild, so I try to be understanding. I don't say anything about it when mother-in-law buys $300 dresses that my daughter will only wear once because I've encouraged a relationship between them. I've even let mother-in-law have her way on every holiday. I've never actually left them alone though. I can't explain exactly, but it just didn't feel right, though she hasn't pushed for alone time. She offered to babysit but let it go when we declined. My 3-year-old daughter has several severe food allergies, but peanuts and eggs are the worst. She also can't have dairy or bananas. Mother-in-law has always doubted my daughter's allergies. She's insisted that her princess of a granddaughter could never have something wrong with her. However, she's never tested to see if it's true. Until today. She was over at our house playing dress up with my daughter. I had a horrible headache, so I asked mother-in-law to watch my daughter so I could lie down for an hour, and she agreed. 20 minutes later I'm woken up to mother-in-law shrieking that there's something wrong with the baby. I go running to my daughter's room and she's gasping for breath and her lips are turning blue. I scream at mother-in-law to call 911 and use an EpiPen on my daughter. My daughter was able to take a deep breath and I noticed she smelled like a banana. The paramedics show up, then start an IV and give daughter meds so she can breathe. I told one of the paramedics that mother-in-law fed my daughter something. He found part of a cookie on the floor. He confronts mother-in-law, who confesses she gave my daughter a peanut butter banana cookie but she didn't know it would hurt her. They admitted my daughter for observation and my husband met us in the hospital. Mother-in-law called him wailing about how she was just trying to show us nothing was wrong with my daughter. We're just too paranoid and have such odd ideas about our daughter's health. She admitted to my husband that she's been making allergen-laced cookies for more than a year. She bakes a huge batch and freezes them. She puts one in her purse every time she sees her daughter just in case she gets a chance to slip it to her. I can't even wrap my head around this. I never suspected mother-in-law would do something like this. We went home after 2 days. The hospital had already reported it to the police and the detective came to our house. He's got copies of everything mother-in-law sent my husband plus 11 voicemails she left me last night. Several of them were just her screaming that she was going to unalive herself because she couldn't live without her baby. The detective doesn't know what is going to happen because he's never seen this before. But for right now they're going to take her into custody, so due to the threats of suicide.
Lay me off and replace me with 2 lazy workers? Enjoy losing thousands. I used to be in charge of the printer room in a rather large company. We shipped a poop ton of product every day, and everything shipped had to have the accompanying printed label/documents. Nothing can even be loaded onto the trucks without this paperwork. Now this was in the olden days of the 90s, so we had 7 massive, 4-foot-tall dot matrix printers that did all the work. These printers were temperamental beaches, and if the paper jammed, the printer did not automatically stop printing. It would just keep pushing/jamming more and more paper into the machine until, if left untended, it would break down. Running the printer room was a 2-person job. When I started I trained for 2 full weeks with the 2 current printer room employees. It was a rough effing 2 weeks, let me tell you, getting the hang of the job, the various things you had to learn, do, etc. One thing that made it even more complicated was the fact that each printer had its own personality with its own problems. Another was the fact that a problem in one printer could have a different fix than the exact same problem in another. The job would be quiet for 45 minutes straight, during which we did routine maintenance and such, but was really slow and quiet and restful. Because this company processed its shipping orders in batches, once an hour. And then boy, on the hour, every hour, the batch of orders would go through and thousands of orders would come spitting out. Now, if you were on top of things and kept everything running smoothly, the orders would print out very neatly and quickly. But if you didn't know what you were doing, if you didn't maintain things just right, you'd get a backup and things would go to poop very, very fast. And when one machine went down you had to fix it fast, before the next one jammed, because guaranteed those machines would jam up multiple times on every batch print job. So I've been working the print room for several months, and things were great. Then my coworker gave his 2 weeks notice. We tried to train my replacement, but he was incredibly lazy and got fired fairly a few days after the end of his training. Which left me in the printer room alone. Then the bosses informed me that my position is being phased out, and I'm going to be replaced by 2 employees transferred from a different department. So not only am I losing my job, but I have to train my replacements. And I desperately needed a good recommendation from this company, so I couldn't just quit or half-butt it. I quickly learned that both of these transfers are lazy and useless. They'd been with the company for decades, had friends in the head office, and knew their jobs were safe. I'd show them how to do something and they'd flat out laugh and say, "Yeah, I'm not doing that." Every day I'd be trying to train them and they would ignore me, chat with each other, leave to go sit in the cafeteria, leaving me to do a 2-person job alone. Luckily I was good enough to handle the workload, but it was annoying. Mindful of the fact that I needed a reference of this company, I kept extensive notes on each day's progress. I clearly documented every single instance of the replacements refusing to learn, even listen to my instructions. I also followed up daily with my direct supervisor, and he knew what was going on. And my notes went into the company files and were passed up the line. Despite my scathing reports, head office did nothing. Now it's my last day. This is the day the training process assigned for letting the newbies work alone, with no help or supervision allowed, to see how well they handle the job and the pressure. I was, in writing, forbidden to help them or answer any questions. As I expected, things fell to poop pretty much immediately, minutes into the first batch of orders. One of the biggest printers jammed, and the clueless twats had no idea how to fix the printer jam. Because they ignored me every time I tried to show them how. So they turned to me, and demand that I fix things. I'm sitting on a desk, coffee in one hand, an apple in the other, and smile and say, "Yeah, I'm not doing that." So one of them is yelling at me while the other is basically thumping uselessly on the printer like a gorilla that just found a candy machine. Then a second printer jams. Paper starts spilling out of the back of the first printer, which, if you knew the job, was a really bad warning sign. "Well, I'm going to go to the cafeteria, good luck," I say as I stand up. As I'm leaving I hear a third printer crunch and jam up. I went to my supervisor and let him know what was happening. He said he not only expected as much, he had predicted so repeatedly to his superiors. He once again specifically forbade me from offering any help. So I went to the cafeteria and read my book for a little over an hour. Then my supervisor comes to me to let me know what happened. The entire printer room is down, every single printer either jammed up or actually broken. The company is losing thousands of dollars every single minute. One of the shipper/receiving supervisors finds me, all in a panic, begging me to get the orders printed. "Sorry, I'm not allowed to do that," I replied. Now several people are running around outside the cafeteria, all in a panic, running from place to place to figure out why they don't have any shipping orders. The chaos took hours to resolve. And I wasn't allowed to fix the problems. Anytime someone started giving me a hard time, my supervisor would intervene and show the memo from the bosses stating that I was forbidden to help in the printer room that day. I spent my entire last day at work drinking coffee, chatting with coworkers, and reading my book. The whole fiasco ended up costing the company tens of thousands of dollars. What's the most disturbing thing that's ever happened to you while you were alone? I nearly became the sacrifice in a satanic ritual. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of Los Angeles. The shortcut was all 2-lane road through total nothingness, except for passing through Amboy, California. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley, with a dormant volcano and lava field on one side and a salt flat on the other. It was also, at the time, a hotspot for satanic group activity. So I was driving by myself in the afternoon. I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign, just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take that route to I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top I am driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes, a suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere, and 2 bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out my 9mm, and chamber a round. Something seemed very wrong, it looked too perfect as if it were staged. An ambush? Was I being paranoid? Something was just wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable, that's what the idiot would do in a horror movie. As I scanned the road I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right side of the woman, behind the Fiero and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple hundred feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror I saw that the 2 bodies had gotten up to their knees and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Somehow I do not think it would have been good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than a movie. What was it that your child told you that gave you chills? When my daughter was 15, she had a friend who was 16 that liked to stay over at our house nearly every day. I enjoyed her being there. She was a happy person and very polite. One afternoon she didn't get off the school bus at our house like she usually did. I asked my daughter where Jane, not her real name, was. My daughter hesitated, then started crying. She told me Jane's stepfather had been sexually abusing her whenever her mom wasn't home. That's why she stayed at our house so often, on the days her mom was at work. Jane had told her mom what was happening and her mom didn't believe her. My daughter took Jane to the school counselor that day and stayed with her while Jane talked to the counselor about the abuse. A policewoman came in. They told my daughter she could go home and thanked her for her support. I was so terrified for Jane, but at the same time, so proud of my daughter. Jane was placed with her aunt, Jane's deceased father's sister. We didn't see as much of her after that, but I took my daughter to the court hearing when the stepfather was charged with criminal sexual conduct with a minor. It was awful to hear. He spent a few months in the local jail and a year on probation. Jane lived with her aunt for several years while she finished high school and a year of college. She is now happily married with a son, after years of therapy.
My entitled boyfriend found out how much money I have. Now he wants me to pay off for a house and a new car, so I dumped him. I want to make it clear that I've always spent money on my boyfriend, buying him nice things and whatnot. He got his PS4 and new gaming PC because of me. My boyfriend however found out that I have a good amount of money and has started to be quite weird about it. Several times he's referred to my money as our money and using our money to buy him the luxury car he's dreamt of having. He wants us to move out of separate apartments and get a house together and has said instead of getting him a small Christmas gift that I should fund a trip for him to see Europe. I'm from Italy and have family in Bulgaria, Croatia and the Netherlands, and he is from Canada. Buying the luxury car, it's less whether I can afford it and more that seems like something you get your husband or wife and not your boyfriend of 3 years. The house I can understand, if we were engaged or something, but we aren't though. He has talked about marriage several times in the past few months and finally yes, I can afford a trip for both of us to tour Europe, but whereas it's something I might have thought of for us to do before, he only brought this up after finding out that I do have the money to pay for it. He found out because we went to visit my family in Italy and my parents, grandparents and the 2 sets of aunts and uncles that we visited all have very large lavish places. I live in a smallish apartment that suits my needs, but the difference between my apartment and my home back in Italy was very noticeable. He asked me what was up and I told him my family is wealthy, but it's not something I try to let define me. The relationship was pretty good up until he found out. I would hate to break up with him because I do love him and love being with him, but the way he's been acting plus past experiences pretty much tells me things are only going to go south now. I was treated very well. I was happy, and yes, he has a consistent job. I don't always buy expensive gifts. The PS4 and computer are the only 2 things that qualify as expensive. Everything else is little things here and there, a t-shirt or a snow globe or something like that. So I didn't automatically dump my boyfriend. I decided I'd have a talk with him. I told him that it was basically really damn inappropriate to find out I have money and start making demands. I told him I have no problems using my finances for our relationship, but that he shouldn't automatically expect that I'm going to put out money on very expensive things for him, just because. He seemed very ashamed and agreed that it was a really crappy thing to do, and he got carried away and a bit too excited. I told him I understood, but to do that was very disrespectful to me and the time we've shared together, because it made me feel like all of a sudden my money is what mattered. For a little while it seemed all was well. Then the other day we were having a minor argument over something that turned into a bigger argument, and he said something along the lines of, well, you don't even want to use what you have for us, so maybe you've never effing cared about me. He got really quiet as though he knew that was a shitty thing to say, and we didn't talk until 2 days later. I was really angry. I was going to talk things through with him. However, this came the relationship fatality. He told a couple people we're good with, despite me asking him to keep the money quiet, that I was really rich and could afford tons of poop. How did I find out? Saturday we all went drinking together. He gets a bit too much in his system and orders an expensive bottle of wine. One of our friends was like, who orders that poop? We're good with our beers and that's too expensive. Our other friend piped up and was like, no, it's good, Rachel is really rich. She can pick up our tab tonight. Cue several other people who I've never told about my family's money suddenly grilling me on why I never trusted them enough to tell them about my money, and oh, thought we were friends, that kind of thing. I broke up with him the next day. He's been blowing up my phone all day, but fuck him. I could have moved past what he said the other day when we were arguing, but to tell people I specifically asked him not to, something I trusted him so much with. Yeah, I've lost a 3-year relationship and am probably going to lose a few friends as well.
In your personal opinion, who has it harder, men or women? Liam Allen, a 22-year-old psychology student? He's done nothing wrong as of right now and is a good student. He probably could have led a successful life, until he was falsely accused of rape. Thankfully, they had evidence from the accuser herself that it wasn't rape and were able to remove all charges. Not all men are this lucky. Though all charges were removed, the original charges are still there somewhere. There's still evidence that he was accused of rape. Say he wasn't. He still has a long list of problems that women definitely don't have. The question says in your personal opinion, so I'm going to freely state that women are the people who cause his problems. Feminists have been the people who have been pushing for gender equality. In reality, however, it's the idealizing of women while downgrading and at the expense of men. Males have longer jail times than women do for the exact same crimes. Who in their right mind thinks that this is equality? Why should one gender be treated with more grace than another for the same thing? Men are 9 times more likely to get shot at work. Men are also more likely to commit suicide at work. And women complain about this non-existent wage gap. Even if said wage gap was real, wouldn't the person who is more likely to lose their life get paid more? On the topic of work, women are 2 times more likely to get hired than a man with the same, or a better application, therefore making it harder for males to obtain a job. As a result, more men than women are homeless. There are unfair scholarships for women. I want to go into a STEM field. Meteorology, to be precise. I will likely get a STEM scholarship just for the fact that I'm a girl. If a man who had a better resume than me applied for the scholarship, I would still get it for the mere fact that I was born female. And what if the man actually needed said scholarship more than me to attend the school? He would be denied funds for an education just because he's a male. The list goes on, but Ethan DeProd did it much better. This is something that happened yesterday. A conversation I heard then joined. My cousin and her parents are going to Europe for a few weeks. They boarded the plane yesterday. However, they were unable to get seats together. My aunt and my grandmother were on the phone yesterday. This is what they were saying: "Grandmother, you're not sitting together. Make sure it isn't sitting by a male." At this point, I looked up to eavesdrop. "Grandmother, she's not." "Oh, that's a relief. If she was, then you would have had to have made a commotion and made sure she got moved by a female." I'm glad it didn't come to that. Me, being me, questioned them after they hung up. "Me, why can't I sit by a man?" "Grandmother, kids should sit by women." "Me, and why is that?" "Mother, because it's a plane and people sit close to each other." "Me, so? But why can't she sit by a male?" "Mother, because it's a man. Men just do that stuff." "Grandmother, kids should not be allowed to sit by men they don't know. They should always sit by a woman." So the point I got was that basically, men shouldn't be around kids they don't know. Why? Because all men are dangerous and all women are nice. If a man approaches a kid, people think he's creepy and think he wants to hurt or kidnap the kid. They then call the police. If a woman approaches a kid, she is seen as loving and compassionate, which is probably why men almost always lose their children to a woman in court. I think this image sums it up pretty accurately. This was only really referring to Western women. In other parts of the world, it is much different. Thus, men have it harder than women by a long shot. I'm not denying that women have problems. We do. There are plenty. Sadly, I've seen lots of answers that have said that women have it harder because of periods and giving birth. Those aren't really valid reasons. The one about having to look a certain way is, there are problems that women face outside of that. But the problems males face are greater and more severe than periods and a teacher asking boys to carry boxes instead of girls. What is the absolute worst Tinder date you've ever been on? My first and worst online date, the drunk and the baby. It's 2008, I'm 18 and I met a girl on OkCupid. She's older than me at 25, educated and a bit alternative. We agreed to meet at a London pub for lunch at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, which is quite a journey for me, but I made it anyway. So, she turns up a bit late with a baby in a baby carriage. Holy crap. I had no idea she had a kid before this, but I didn't have a problem with it. She doesn't address that I didn't know about her kid but says she couldn't find babysitting. Cool. No problem. We both go up and order a drink separately and hang out and chat. We've been there for about 2 hours and she's gone up to the bar a whole bunch of times, mostly coming back with coffees and the occasional Coca-Cola. But then, quite suddenly, she falls forward onto the table and catches herself with her elbows and takes a big sigh and says, "Oh man. I didn't mean to get so drunk." "What?" I tell her I didn't realize that she's even been drinking, but she tells me that she's been having Irish coffees, rum and cokes as well as shots at the bar. So at this point I start looking for an out, but she's becoming more and more despondent and her 1-year-old is sitting in his stroller, so I can't leave in good conscience. I start encouraging her to get a taxi home and she starts to cry, apologizing and saying that I must hate her. But shortly after she closes her eyes and will only respond in mumbles and groans. I try and get her to come around enough to get an address out of her, which I can't, so I take her phone, which wasn't passworded, find a contact called Mom and call it. I was hoping she could come and pick her up, but it turns out Mom lives in the south of Spain. She isn't one bit happy to hear from me after I explain what happened, but presenting myself as a friend. Nonetheless, she gives me an address to get her to. I ask the bar to call me a taxi, which they do, and one of the bar staff takes pity on me and helps me get the woman, the baby and the stroller into the cab. I was about to give the driver money for the trip and see them off, but I realized that was a bad idea because who knows what would happen? So I got in the taxi to go take her home holding a baby the entire way, which I've never done in my life at that point. Turns out the driver is a stand-up bloke and I explain what has happened and we have a laugh about it. When we get there he even assembles the stroller for me as I take her and place her on her doorstep. I find her keys and get her door open, at which point some guy pops his head round the corner from the kitchen and asks, "Who the hell are you?" I tell him my name and that I'm a friend and ask who he is. He says he's her fiancé. Uh-oh. He's pretty angry that I've gotten his fiancé with his child drunk in the middle of the day. After getting the stroller through the door he begins to carry her up the stairs and he says to me, "You stay right there. You and I need to have a little chat." Nope. As soon as he turns the corner at the top of the stairs I turn and make a run for it, jump back in the taxi who I asked to take me to the nearest tube station. Afterward I needed some catharsis, so texted some friends who were locals and went out proper. And the kicker? On the train home that night I get a text message from her. "Had a lovely time. Can't wait to see you again." I block her number and never hear from her again.
I found out my husband wanted to end his life and stopped him, and he thinks I never knew his plans. My husband and I are 28. We have 3 kids, and he's the only boyfriend I've ever had. He's been with me since high school. He's always had low self-esteem. I do as well, but not like he does. One day maybe 7 years ago we got new phones, and I found out I can read his texts. He can see mine too, but he didn't know about it. This happened for like another 2 years. For his birthday and Christmas I'd snoop around his texts and see if there's something he was talking about that he wanted. One day, around November I was being nosy to see what I can get him for Christmas. I was pregnant with our second child at the time. I saw he was texting someone something suspicious, saying where can we meet, and I thought this was with another girl. I read the more and I found out he was buying substances. My husband and I don't even drink, so I freaked out. I wondered about how long this was going on for, if I even knew my own husband anymore. Turns out he was buying something that doesn't get you feeling good, but rather something that unalives you. I looked around everywhere. I tore our room apart and didn't find anything. I went through the search history and all his emails on his phone when he was asleep that night, and found out he was making arrangements for a specific date 3 months after I was due. He was looking at life insurance, which we have had since I'm a stay-at-home mom. He was even looking up how much it costs to be cremated. Once he got home, the first thing I did was sneak his phone and text that guy and say, I'm no longer interested. If someone else tells you otherwise it means someone else has my phone, and I deleted that guy's number. I didn't want him to know I was snooping, but the thought of my husband not being around tore me. I remember being sick to my stomach and bawling in our room just thinking of the idea of not having him around. I love him more than life in itself. I would die for him and not even have to think about it. My husband is my entire world. That day I made sure he knew that, even if it meant embarrassing myself. I started bringing him flowers at work almost every day. When he would come through the door I would screech with excitement and give him a hug and a smooch and tell him I missed him so much and I couldn't stop thinking about him all day. When I was out with him, I'd tell him how beautiful and handsome he is. When he was around my friends I'd say, look at my husband, he's so beautiful. I call him at work and ask how much longer until he's home. I got him to start going to therapy too. One night I woke him up because I was freaking out and couldn't sleep. I told him I had a nightmare. I said I had a dream he passed away. He said, why is that a bad thing? And I told him how he's my entire world and other than our son, and our other on the way, he's all I live for. He said but things would be better if I was out of your hair. And I said no they wouldn't. If you left me it would literally ruin my life. He said not if you're financially well off. You'll be much better off, and I said I could have all the money in the world. It would mean nothing if I didn't have you. I'd much rather be homeless but still have you as my husband than be filthy rich and you be gone. And he said, are you serious? And I said 100%. I'd sleep under a bridge if it meant I still got to sleep next to you. He said I didn't know you felt that way, and I said I really do. I asked if I could go with him to therapy. He said yes. I told his therapist I think he has depression, and he admitted he might. He got a prescription, and it seemed to help him a whole lot. Even though it's been 5 years, I still do all those nice things for him, like call him handsome and bring him flowers. I don't ever want him to second guess for a second that he's my sunshine.
What glamorized career path is actually a complete nightmare. Working at a highly rated restaurant in my city, we get kids asking to stage all the time. They'll ask me how to get into the field and I try to be brutally honest. Don't get into the industry unless you know exactly what you're getting into. The fact you have to work for free before being offered a job, rather than going off experience/interview/references like most other jobs, should be a red flag. The pay increase is one of the slowest of all industries. A lot of places don't allow overtime, but you have to be prepared for service, so the expectation is you'll willingly work off the clock 20+ hours each week. Insurance is only for management, and you won't have time to fix that nagging shoulder issue or the loss of cartilage in your knees, or the carpal tunnel, because you're almost always understaffed and can't miss work, and even the idea of it makes you feel guilty. You'll see people fall to substance abuse and depression, and may likely succumb to it yourself when the cute bartender is the only girl whose schedule makes it possible to have a normal relationship. Otherwise you may get to see your SO once a week on your day off, if you're that lucky, or you're fortunate to already live with them and sleep next to them when you get home late and they've already gone to bed. If you get into the field young enough, you may bust your butt and make it far quickly, but then you're stuck with no marketable skills outside of cooking, and you want to go to school to get into a job with regular work/life balance and adequate pay, but then again, you're working 40+ to pay bills. How can you afford to make time for school without moving back in with your parents? Eating out is a luxury, and your job is not recession-proof. After a 10+ hours day, you'll get home and work on new menu ideas. You'll lay in bed thinking about your prep list. How you have a BO in 2 days and you forgot to order enough proteins and have to get up early to get them yourself, or forgot to add something important to the AM prep list. You'll spend too much money on knives. And even more on post-service rounds at the bar. If you take yourself, too, seriously, it becomes all-encompassing, and 10 years later, you'll realize you've been breaking your back for less than/equal to what a fast food manager makes. May not be the case for some, but it is for most. It's not all bad. You get to play with sharp knives and fire. You can swear in 4 languages. You'll meet tons of interesting people. You'll probably be in somewhat good shape because you're constantly moving and working at a calorie deficit. I also prefer smaller owned restaurants, where you answer to just the owner and/or exec chef, rather than a big company where you have the owner, CEO, CFO, exec sue, etc., but the pay is typically lower. What is the hardest thing you have ever done? Going to school the day after my father, a teacher there, had been arrested as a pedo. It came out of the blue. I was being taught by my dad, a weird experience, as anybody in the same position will tell you, when, one day, the headmaster came into our class halfway through and took my dad away and replaced him with a supply teacher. Not a big deal, I thought, until my mum picked me up from school that evening. Obviously my brother and I asked what was happening and we were told not to worry about it, he wasn't well. We carried on for a day or so until, as my friends were round, my mum called me into her room. It had never happened before. She told me that my dad had been arrested and taken to jail for possessing child videos and substances, and that he'd be away for a while. I was then packed off to scouts and then back to school the next morning while a letter was sent around warning the parents that this had happened. That was hard for me. Knowing your dad has gone off to jail is hard, visiting him is harder, but going into school and seeing your younger brother having to fight off bullies because his dad's a pedo is heartbreaking. However, on top of all that is your mom. You know she's upset, how wouldn't she be? All of her former friends know that she's married to a pedo and might be staying with him. But telling her that you and your brother are okay and are doing well at school and not having any problems despite the constant, schoolyard and societal, mockery of a man who you love is hard. Especially when she's only staying with him because of the family that she now has. To be honest, the whole thing is hard. Seeing your dad, a man who you idolize, stripped down and robbed of any friends he had is tough. Seeing your mom holding on to a relationship and being ostracized by her friends for doing so is hard, she's so nice. Seeing your brother getting expelled from school for defending himself against bullies picking on his biggest weakness is hard. And being told by social services that your dad is a predator and wasn't punished enough by the law courts, so would be losing his children. That's hard too. But, overall, it's the fact that, to this day, our whole family feels constantly wary that we'll get uncovered as the family containing a pedo and have to relocate. We're a family living in fear and will continue to be so as long as we stay in the country. People who have survived a school shooting, what was the experience like? The weird kid known for being obsessed with firearms got kicked off the speech and debate team and decided to get revenge on the teacher who kicked him off. He took one of his dad's illegal firearms and went into the school on Friday the 13th. He fired 2 shots right off my hallway and unalived a girl, then he went to the library, started a fire and continued on his spree. I was in my science class right off the hallway. We were in the middle of a test and I just wanted out. I was about to ask to go to the bathroom when I decided F it, I'll finish the test, then go home. 5 minutes later there was a gunshot. The first thing that crossed my mind was that a janitor was removing one of those giant wooden doors and accidentally dropped it, slapping it against the ground. Students looked back and forth nervously. Then a second shot went off another minute later. My teacher went out into the hallway, and a minute later returned to the room and told us to get into lockdown. I guess he saw the smoke in the stairwell and saw what happened in that hallway. Before long we were all crammed into the corners behind the big lab tables. I was sitting in the middle of the classroom, so I was one of the last kids to get to a spot, so I was basically sitting out in the middle of the room hiding behind a trash can. One of the girls close to me peed herself out of fear and the guy who had a crush on her took this as an opportunity to comfort her, and then I heard him asking her for her number. The whole time my teacher, a massive slab of muscle, was upright right next to one of the 2 doors ready to F up anyone that might walk in. We sat there for what felt like hours before the fire alarm went off. Then even longer and we began hearing voices down the hallway. My teacher looked right to me, in the middle of the room, with a nervous look in his eyes signaling something was about to happen. I saw my teacher. Amping ready, thumping head, and then I heard the footsteps coming closer and closer. Our teacher looked like he was ready to pounce on the guy as soon as he showed up. And then just as the footsteps got very, very close, right outside the door, another shot rang out and we heard something thud on the floor. We lay there for a few minutes and heard nothing more. My teacher creaked the door open and went pale immediately. Turns out that he was seeing the guy with the firearm, now on the floor without a dome, having just taken his own life. My wife and children have been away for several weeks, and I don't miss them. My 28 male wife, Fiona, 26 female, went away to visit her family in another part of the country for a few weeks. They were having a camping trip, and since I recently started working a new job and also didn't want to be around my in-laws for that long, I stayed behind. She took our 2 daughters, ages 2 and 6 months, with her. She called today to talk and also to tell me that she misses me. And I suddenly realized that I hadn't missed her or the children at all. Shoot, I hadn't even really thought about them. For all I could have known or cared, I was back to my free and single self, making my own food, doing my own household chores, having free time to do whatever I pleased. I went out of my way to reconnect with old friends I hadn't seen in years, and it was amazing. I felt so free, and the whole time, I didn't once think about how my wife was doing out there, how my oldest daughter might be missing me, or anything. I didn't know, or want to know, anything about their lives at that point. My youngest daughter started eating solid food while she was out there, and started sitting up on her own. It doesn't bother me in the slightest that I missed those first moments with her. I know this sounds awful, but I have no concern whatsoever about them all. I feel like I could do this forever, be alone, play video games, use substances, responsibly, hang out with whoever I want, do whatever I want whenever I want. I don't feel lonely, isolated, heartsick, sad, depressed, purposeless, suppressed, or anything of the sort. I almost don't want these weeks to end. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to leave my family, I know that my children need a father figure, and I want to do my best to provide for them and do all the things a father is supposed to do for his children. And I know I'm a bad parent, and I'll never be the father they should have had. That doesn't mean I won't continue to try and do my best for them, but, darn, if it doesn't feel amazing to just be free and single for a few weeks. To all travelers, what is your creepiest hotel story? Found a hotel in Yangon, Burma, the day we got there for pretty cheap. They mentioned the rates were low because maintenance was being done on several floors. We sleep fine, wake up and head to breakfast. At breakfast we met some Germans who had also stayed the night in our hotel. They said they had not slept well because during the middle of the night someone woke them up to move them from the floor they were on. We, us and the Germans, found out later that they had been moved because they were on one of the levels reserved for maintenance, and part of the maintenance included gassing the rooms for bugs. During the middle of the night they were just going around the room shoving the gas nozzle or whatever under the doors and letting them run. Wound up aliving the two people next to the Germans before they realized they'd accidentally booked people on that floor. We weren't on that floor thankfully, but it has always stuck with me how seemingly easy it could have been to have gotten mixed up in that. My best friend's mistress doesn't know that he is actually broke. My wife's reaction to the whole thing really bummed me out. My 41 male best friend Jack, 41 male, since kindergarten cheated on his wife Anna, 39 female, with a girl half his age, Max, 25 female. Anna is one of the best human beings I've ever met. She is very beautiful, kind and caring. She is very successful too. When Jack met her, he was so in love that he wrote an ironclad prenup just to be with her. In other words, Jack has nothing to his name. He met Max on a work trip and it was then that he cheated on Anna. The affair lasted for 2 months until Max made an ultimatum to leave his wife for her. Jack refused and tried to end the affair, so Max told Anna everything. This broke Anna beyond repair and she told Jack that she couldn't forgive him. They're in the process of divorcing now and Jack lives in a small studio apartment near his work. After Jack lost hope to reconciliation with Anna, he started seeing Max again. Now they're officially dating. My wife Pat, 32 female, knows all these details. She is a more forgiving and understanding person than I am and I love that about her. She is way more tolerant because I am Team Anna and there's nothing Jack can say to make me change my opinion. Now everything is settled. My wife said that she wanted to invite Jack and his new girlfriend to our place. I was very reluctant at first, but my wife insisted that my friendship with Jack is important. We are basically brothers and we should accept people we love even with their flaws. It made sense and I trust my wife to always make sense. The dinner was awkward. I couldn't see past these two cheaters. Jack pretending to be happy and Max overexcited over the fact that she won this prize named Jack. I understood then that things won't be the same, but my wife was right. I love Jack and that's the most important now. Max talked about her upbringing and the hard life she had growing up. She talked about her future with Jack and all the fun they would have. It dawned on me that she didn't know that they couldn't do half of what she is dreaming of with Jack's salary. It dawned on me why she chose him and why she was so willing to hurt an innocent woman that way. She had learned to know the Jack who lived in fancy hotels and drove a fancy car. When I asked her about their living arrangements, Max said that Jack temporarily is living in a studio apartment until the divorce is settled. Max talked about what she would do to their place, renovation and redecorating. The apartment that Anna bought for her family with her hard-earned money, the one she decorated with her husband from scratch to make it their home. I remember how happy and full of dreams she was when she found her dream home. To hear Max sitting there, talking about how she would use money she never earned to redecorate a home she wasn't entitled to, making fun of another woman's taste and style, it brought tears to my eyes. Yes, men can get emotional too. Jack has not told Max the truth. When they left, Pat and I started discussing our dear friends. I was very surprised when Pat angrily told me that I was cruel and callous for not wanting to enlighten Max about her new situation. My wife thought that Max had a tough life and she deserved to have a good life now. I was taken aback by my wife's logic. I told my wife that I will not tell Max anything but that if she wanted them be my guest. But now I don't understand my wife and I'm turned off by her morals. Anna was a great friend to my wife, but my wife doesn't seem to give a rat's ass about her. My wife then got very angry and accused me of caring too much about Anna. That's when I ended the discussion because I realized that this was going below the belt. What was your biggest mess up when dating an identical twin? I mistook the two and said some things I regret now. Let's call the twins Chad and Charles. I had maybe one class with Charles, and we never spoke. Then, I started to have classes with Chad, and we were inseparable. He wasn't only my boyfriend, but also my best friend. Anyways, he broke up with me out of nowhere. Every time I saw him after that, he would act like a supreme asshole towards me. I never knew what I did to deserve that, but it hurt a lot. When high school ended, Chad went to an out-of-state college, and Charles ended up going to the same college as me. Fast forward to the first day of sophomore year of college. Charles and I had the same class together. It's a huge lecture hall. He could sit wherever he wants, but he chooses to sit next to me. I didn't even notice until he said hi to me. I just responded hey back. Then, he proceeded to apologize for being mean to me in high school. I was super confused, but I figured he felt bad that he stopped talking to me after Chad and I broke up. I said, oh, don't worry about that. It was so long ago. If anything, it's your brother who should apologize. My brother? He asked. Yeah. Chad was such a dick after we broke up. Seriously, fuck that guy. Now, I knew that I was saying this to his brother, but the two of them weren't that close. I doubted that he would ever tell Chad that I said that. Even if he did, I wouldn't have cared. Charles just responded with, oh right, Chad. Then, class began. We started taking notes. Charles was writing with his left hand. I thought it was odd and told him, wait, I never knew you were left-handed too. I thought it was just Chad. He just gave me a little nod, and we went back to taking notes. Later that day I asked him whether he would like to come back to my room and talk. He very bluntly said no to me. Because I can be kind of slow sometimes, things didn't click in my brain until afterwards. I rushed to Facebook and looked at Chad's profile. He had just transferred to the same college as me. I was talking to him the entire time. Entitled Mom ends my engagement and gets me banned from a steakhouse all in one night. I can finally air my uncensored frustration about the night my engagement was single-handedly corrupted by my entitled mother-in-law. Let's call her Ellen because she always reminded me of Ellen DeGeneres, even before all this recent news broke. Okay, so my girlfriend and I were really engaged to be engaged. We both agreed we wanted to get married, but I hadn't done the formal proposal yet because we wanted to meet each other's families first. Neither lived nearby. I always thought the old trope about meeting the in-laws being a big fiasco was a myth, both because I was younger and more naive then, and because I'm lucky to have easy parents. My girlfriend met them for a few hours. Once we were alone, just me and them, I told them my intentions and my mom asked, "Does she have any kids already?" And my dad asked, "Does she have a good solid job?" And they both asked, "You really love her?" And that was that. I had their full support for the marriage. I thought meeting her parents would be the same. Some grilling was to be expected, but as long as I was honest and respectful, it would all be fine. Relevant fact, they had my girlfriend when they were teenagers, by surprise, so now had a do-over daughter, their words, not mine, who was just 6 years old. My girlfriend and I made the trip up to their city and I met them for the first time over dinner at a steakhouse. It was pretty upscale, and we'd scheduled the dinner for 8 p.m., so I was surprised to see they brought the kid along with them. I met everyone at once and the initial awkwardness settled once we'd sat down. We were making great small talk when the 6-year-old said she was thirsty. No big deal, right? Well, all of a sudden Ellen starts screaming, "Water, water, water!" A waiter came rushing over to see what the commotion was and, without even making eye contact with the poor guy, Ellen went, "We've been here forever and no one's even gotten us any water." My daughter's been asking. We had been sitting for about 15 or 20 minutes without service, but they were visibly behind, and there were no circumstances that would have warranted that shouting. I should have realized from how unfazed everyone else at the table was that I should be bracing myself for a long night, but I couldn't imagine what was to come at that point. The waiter rushed over with water and apologized for the delay, explaining a few very large parties had arrived all at once. The guy seemed sincere, and quite affable, so I thought the water would just be an anomaly in an otherwise pleasant night. Then Ellen kicked into full gear. "We'll need a kid's menu," she informed the waiter. He said that they didn't have a kid's menu, but that the chef could simplify most dishes. "What do you mean you don't have a kid's menu?" Ellen replied in total disbelief, as though he'd said they didn't have a fire exit. He explained they didn't get too many child visitors and that there were enough plain foods on the menu that no separate menu had ever been necessary. Ellen sighed dramatically and waved him away. Literally, without saying a word, waved him off from the table. I tried to give him an apologetic glance but, understandably, he didn't look back our way. I was so glad the poor guy left and didn't have to be subjected to her anymore. Meanwhile she turned her attention on me, and I almost wished he'd come back. At least he was getting paid to be here. She was like, "So you're a screenwriter?" And I explained, "Well, yes and no. I want to be, but it's hard to get a job in that field that you can support yourself in, so I'm working at a non-profit right now. There's a screenwriting component to the job though, so I'm really happy there." Ellen turned to her 6-year-old and went, "Hear that, hon? You want to be sure to snag a man who works for profit. Learn from this. It's not too late for you." I couldn't tell if she was trying to be funny or not, so I just let it pass, looking over to my girlfriend to see if she was even considering speaking up on my behalf. Nope. The waiter came back, visibly nervous. That hurt, because he was so relaxed and personable at the start of the meal. He asked if we'd like to hear the specials before we ordered and Ellen said sure. Here's how that went. The waiter said, "First we have a lightly seared strip steak." Ellen then said, "Next." The waiter replied, "Oh. Okay. Then we have a broiled leg of grass-fed." Ellen said, "Next." Then the waiter continued, We have a pasta primavera mixed," with which Ellen proceeded to say next again very loudly. And on until he'd gone through all 7 or 10 specials, even though she ultimately ordered off the menu, a plain ribeye, well done. She tried to order her daughter the same, but the kid said she just wanted plain mashed potatoes, so Ellen let her get mashed potatoes alone for dinner. Then she sent the waiter away. The rest of us hadn't even ordered yet, and everyone else just sat there like it was entirely normal. I waited for someone to say something, thinking it was more her older daughter's, my girlfriend's, place or her husband's, but when no one did I couldn't help myself. Was the one steak and potatoes going to be for all of us, or? My girlfriend explained, in the tone you'd use for a tourist violating a sacred local taboo, "My mom always has the waiter put the kids' food in first, so it can get started right away. We'll order once the kitchen has hers." I thought she was joking, since Ellen didn't just order her kids' food, she also ordered her own dinner too. So I laughed. "Something funny?" Ellen asked. Then I realized she was serious, and I shut up. Thankfully her dad at least recognized that what was normal for them might not be as regular to me and tried to lighten the mood with a change of topic. But not even 10 minutes after we'd ordered, I guess technically 5 minutes after we'd ordered, 10 minutes after she and her daughter had ordered, Ellen started in again. Another table, that had been there long before we were, got a side order of mashed potatoes with their meal. Ellen threw a total conniption. She was sputtering so inaudibly that none of us could figure out what was wrong at first. Finally she managed to flag down some bus boy who barely spoke English and began laying into him like he just side-swiped her on the freeway. He kept trying to explain he wasn't a server and he could go get one, but she wouldn't stop to breath long enough for him to find someone who could actually help. All the while I kept looking at my girlfriend for signs of embarrassment, or at the very least irritation, but you wouldn't have known if she was even hearing any of this. Our waiter came over, somehow still feigning a smile despite knowing what he was walking into, and Ellen actually goes, "Why did that table get mashed potatoes and ours haven't come yet?" The waiter kindly but concisely explained, "Well ma'am, those people ordered potatoes before your party had placed their order." Ellen looks this man dead in the eye, finally, and says, "Well, it doesn't matter when they ordered it. My daughter is the youngest one here. Her food should come out first." You could tell the waiter was working hard to restrain himself at this point. He explained it was a first come, first served policy and age didn't help one way or the other. He offered to go check on the potatoes. Ellen agreed, or more specifically she said, "Yeah, you better," but I was clocking him and he went right back to his server station. Because we had only just ordered a few minutes ago, 3 or 5 more minutes passed, during which we could have no other discussion at the table except how awful this restaurant was, how hungry the poor baby was, who hadn't said a word about being hungry this whole time and was contently playing her loud iPad game, without headphones, disturbing all the other diners around us, and how America has lost all respect for motherhood because it's just a me culture now. I chimed in, "I'm with you on that last part," and to my utter shock, instead of laughing at my joke, my girlfriend seems annoyed with me. So after a few minutes the waiter comes back and says the potatoes will be out very soon. Ellen then goes and does something that, again, I thought was just a myth. She took 3 singles and a 5 out of her wallet and put them on the table in full view of the waiter. Then she took 1 single away and said, "Every table I see getting potatoes before us is a bill gone." I was absolutely mortified. The waiter, to his unending credit, just took a deep breath and said, "I don't have control over the order in which the kitchen fires tickets, but what I can tell you is it should be out any minute." And left without saying anything disparaging. I had been holding my tongue all night as well, in the name of my relationship, but once the tip hit the table, the $8 tip for a $100 plus bill, on top of all else, I figured if my girlfriend was half the woman I thought she was then she wouldn't mind my speaking up at this point. If anything, she'd be supportive, right? So I scooted my chair back a bit and said, "Listen, I know what you're doing with the cash on the table, but that kind of thing makes me really uncomfortable, and it's just not called for. Please put the money away or we can just continue this some other time." My girlfriend's dad spits back, "What? How cheap do you have to be to not believe in tipping service workers?" Before I could process whether he was serious or yanking my chain, Ellen shocked me with, "No, you know what, you're right, this isn't necessary." I should have known better than to be relieved. She folded the bills back into her wallet, patiently waited for the next plate of mashed potatoes to be carried out, and when it wasn't delivered to us, it was a very common side dish at this place, a steakhouse, she went right up to a stranger's table and picked it up off their table. She half explained something about her daughter starving to death, as she was walking away with the stranger's food, but unsurprisingly, that wasn't convincing enough for them. The old lady she took it from followed her right over to our table and tried to take it back. I was already searching for my coat tag in preparation to go, but a shoving match was beginning to unfold between Ellen and an elderly woman with a tennis ball walker, and far be it for me to sit through all that had happened only to leave just as the night was getting interesting. The elderly woman was like, "Give me back my potatoes. Who are you?" And the poor little girl was like, "Mommy, it's okay, don't take someone else's potatoes." But it all fell on deaf ears. Ellen yelled at the old lady, "How could you sit there and eat these when my daughter hasn't even been served yet? She's sitting here hungry, just a little girl, and you're over there stuffing your face? Come on, other potatoes will be out any minute." And the old lady, got to love her, was like, "Great, if they'll be out any minute, then what's the effing problem?" To which Ellen still found holier than thou ground, gasping, "Language, please." Finally the waiter, and this time someone higher up as well, I think the manager, thank God, came over to separate them, as they had begun to raise their voices and cause a disturbance. Staff had already asked Ellen to turn down her daughter's iPad multiple times without heat, and I'm guessing the waiter informed management about the tip on the table, stunt she pulled, because this was their final straw. They told us we were going to have to leave the restaurant, but we don't even have our food yet. Ellen complained to the guy, this was clearly not the manager's first rodeo. "You can take the food that's already been served free of charge, everything else will be cancelled. Please leave immediately." The old lady didn't miss her chance to knock the potatoes right onto the floor so we couldn't try to take them with us. Nothing else had been served yet, so we had to leave without any food. When my girlfriend and I were finally alone in our car she said, "Can you believe that?" And I said, "Not at all, and I really can't believe you didn't warn me." And she went, "How could I have known about any of that?" And, confused, I asked, "Is she not usually like that?" Even more confused than me, my girlfriend asked, "Who? Your mom? What's my mom got to do with the terrible service at that place?" That was the beginning of the end of our relationship. The fact that she didn't see anything wrong with her mom's behavior, and that I'd be marrying into that situation, shook me too deeply. We both dodged a bullet in more ways than one. In hindsight, we weren't right for each other, regardless of who her family was. Her mom saved us both a lot of time and heartache, helping me realize in one night what would have probably taken us years otherwise. Within a month we'd moved into separate apartments and gone on a break, that ended up lasting forever. "I'm not sorry I won't see you again, Ellen. I am sorry any waitstaff ever will, though." Came home to my wife on Bumble. I work shifts. I got home today a little after midnight. My wife was home in bed asleep, but her phone screen and flashlight was lighting up the room. I guess it hadn't locked because the light was on. I walked over to her and noticed it was open to Bumble. I didn't freak out, not yet. I gently lifted the phone from her hand and turned off the flashlight. Then I did what anyone would do. I looked to see who she had been matching with and messaging. There must have been a dozen or so men whom she had been chatting with. A few of them she had given her Snapchat and phone number. So I checked her texts. Sure enough, she had been cheating on me. It was clear. Multiple hookup arrangements. Multiple instances of her initiating conversation asking for intercourse, where to meet, etc. I threw her phone and turned the lights on. I told her I'd like you to leave. Now. She was confused obviously, but immediately started searching for her phone. I told her where to find it and to grab some clothes for the road. I offered to help her empty the closet and pack up her car. This wasn't the first time she had betrayed my trust, and I refused to see it before. She's out and so is my trust. I don't ever want to see her again. My wife deserves a one-night stand after beating cancer. My wife and I have been married since 2001 and together since 1999. She is the most intelligent, thoughtful, caring, loyal person I know, and I have always thought of myself as fortunate to have met and married her. She is, even today, aesthetically beautiful, and men have told her this throughout our marriage. She has always shot them down. Earlier this year, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer, stage 4, and had a full hysterectomy. It was all dealt with quickly and she made a full recovery. It was very hard for her, and at points she told me she just felt like giving in to the cancer, but she got through it all. I took time off work to look after her after the surgery and all seemed well. There were some to be expected emotional instances on her part, and although I am not an emotional person, we dealt with them together. After her recovery, she was insistent that we start living life to the fullest and took a 10-day trip to Europe, followed by a trip to Belize. We also have a trip to the UK and Spain/Portugal later this year. I am fine with these things, building memories and crossing bucket list adventures off our list. I also understand that these are a result of feeling fragile on her part. She also took up yoga, swimming and healthy cooking classes. I was fully on board until last week. Last week she came home from work and told me she wanted a hall pass. A one-time opportunity for her to have intimacy with someone else besides me. She said that since her cancer diagnosis, her outlook on life has changed and she doesn't want to be handcuffed from doing things she wants to. She explained that there is this guy at her work that she has always had some attraction to. He is leaving the company and she will never see him again, so this is the perfect opportunity to sleep with someone else. She said that I could say no of course, but that she would be mad/disappointed at me for an indeterminate amount of time and that it would be confirmation of my male toxicity and insecurity. I don't consider myself to be toxic, and if not wanting your wife of 20+ years to have intimacy with someone else is insecure, then I guess I am insecure. I told her that I appreciated her talking to me about this, but approval via coercion is not approval. I also said that I do not appreciate her language in describing my, as of yet, unknown reaction to this very large issue that could affect the rest of our marriage/life. I got up in the morning, she basically said that she was sorry for putting such a large decision solely on my shoulders and that to help she was taking the decision away from me. She booked a hotel near where her coworkers are having a party/send-off for this guy, and she would spend the night there, with him, and hope that I would be here when she got back. That she would answer any questions I have about the night after it happened, but not before. She will not tell me who he is or anything about him because she knows me too well, and that I will dwell and obsess over him, and that would make it too real for me, which is pretty accurate. Her point of view is that the less I know the better, which contradicts the offer to tell me anything I want to know after it happened. I think she knows I won't want to know/ask anything, or she simply will not tell me. Part of me thinks, at least she has been honest with me and she has been through a lot since finding out she had cancer, so maybe I should just let it happen. I certainly have no concept of what she went through, so I cannot dismiss how this affected her mental state/outlook on life. Part of me wants to put my foot down and say this is not going to happen and deal with those consequences when they happen. Her best friend called me insensitive for even suggesting that I wouldn't let it happen, because I have no idea what she went through. I find it hard to believe that she is okay with the possibility of throwing away 20+ years of marriage over some guy that she has had no relationship with outside of work, and that I should just call her bluff. Maybe she thinks similarly, that I won't throw away the marriage because of one encounter. I just don't know what to do. I empathize with her, and then an instant later I am angry with her. Part of me wants to know who this guy is. What does he look like? What has he got that is so enthralling for her? Is he just a safe option? Is he married? Does his wife know? Would I be a callous a-hole for saying no? What can I do besides walking away? Go to the next part. Update: my wife deserves a one-night stand after beating cancer. It has been an exhausting couple of days. I was hoping that my opposition to her plans would give her pause, but unfortunately, that did not happen. I said I am a hard no, and I am not sure how I will feel about you, if you go ahead with it. I was met once again with "this is for me, it will be one time, what can I say to help you deal with it, you'll get over it, we were meant to be regardless of the situation" remarks leading up to Saturday. She left Saturday, to meet her coworkers, but in reality she left to F the guy. I asked her to text me when she was leaving for the bar, and when she did I asked her if she was really going to go through with this. After her response, "I am not answering any more questions tonight, I will see you tomorrow." I blocked my wife. Then I did something either stupid or brilliant. I went to the bar where the get-together was happening. Well, not the bar, but a transit bench across the street. I waited for a long time. It was running through my mind the leading up to this event, that I need to know who this guy was, maybe to compare myself against him. To see what he had that I do not. It was driving me crazy not knowing who he was and what was so special about him that she would ruin a marriage for. After what seemed like eternity, a woman that I recognized from my wife's office left the bar and got in a cab. Soon other people started filing out and a whole group came out and people were hugging a man and shaking his hand. I assumed that I had my guy. I didn't see my wife and had a brief thought that maybe she called it all off. I unblocked her and there were no messages. Everyone said their goodbyes and left. Dude was standing outside for a few minutes and then my wife came out. She looked around, took his hand and started walking away together. Of all the emotions I went through, shock, sadness, anger, it was disgust that really made the event for me. This guy was tall, fit, and had nice hair. I on the other hand was short, kinda of skinny fat, and I was bald. I followed them until they got to a hotel, and ultimately, I felt like a pervert for watching from a distance. I followed until they got to the hotel, and then turned around and went home. I woke up Sunday morning and put a lock on the master bedroom door. I moved her things to the spare room and left a note asking her to find other accommodations as quickly as possible. I visited another friend who is a lawyer and he gave me some sage advice and a couple of recommendations for divorce attorneys and made the introductions. My wife had been calling me numerous times since around 11 or so. Once blocked, the calls go to voicemail. I listened to the first couple but felt nothing but some satisfaction when she couldn't get through to me and she was obviously becoming concerned. I didn't want to go home but I left in such a hurry that I didn't plan an overnight properly. I got home around 9 and as per my buddy's advice, I recorded the interaction. I was halfway up the stairs when she came up from the family room asking what was going on. Could we talk? I thought we talked about this. I just answered with I am not interested in discussing this tonight and went to bed. After not getting a response from me through the door, she left me alone. I feel kind of like a child for not talking with her and shutting the door on her, but I just couldn't look at her. Monday I got up and ready for work. She was waiting for me and asked if we could discuss getting back to normal. I said, you have been doing all the talking for the both of us for the last week, why don't you continue, and left for work. And then I said to her that I have an appointment with the attorneys my friend recommended for this week. Go to the next part. Update 2: My wife deserves a one-night stand after beating cancer. My lawyer wasn't available for a few days, so I was faced with the reality of having to live with my wife in the interim. I really didn't want to go home and have any discussion, let alone a discussion about our relationship. When I did get home, I was basically ambushed by her friends and my mother-in-law. Instead of taking the remorseful approach, they decided that a full court press was what the situation warranted and I was basically berated by them. Her best friend was definitely the ringleader, but all of them decided to say such things as, she's been through a lot, you don't know what she's been through, you have no idea what it is like to face something like this was a one-time thing, at least she told you she could have hidden it from you, she will never see the guy again, and my favorite, you are an a-hole for what you have been putting her through these last couple of days. I listened with a dumb SS smirk on my face, and when there was a lull in their fury, I asked if they were all done now. Then I asked my wife if there was anyone in her circle of friends or anyone else that she forgot to tell about this. I quietly informed all of them that I was going to sit down with their husbands and tell them about how they verbally abusing me, shaming me and trying to coerce me into staying with a cheater. After I told them to leave, I said that I had no say in entire event and so they have no say in whether I stay or not. My wife sort of apologized. She said that she regretted the entire thing. I said there is a difference between regret and remorse. You regret what happened because of the cause and effect. You have regret because your life will never be the same, our relationship will never be the same because you were unconcerned about me and what I wanted. She asked if I had any questions that she would answer them now, no matter how disturbing. I said that the one question I do have is, why? Why someone else in the first place? She said that the cancer scared her to her core. She felt like she was rushing toward mortality and stepping out of that tunnel was appealing. She said that after all this time of being a wife, and mother and worrying about family, this was something just for her. An escape. The guy was just someone who was interested in her for a long time, she knew he wouldn't say no and was completely opposite to me. I told her that I saw you and him coming out of the bar that night. I watched you walk away from the bar hand in hand towards the hotel. I said that you looked too familiar with each other and asked if there was something going on before all this. She said no, but who knows if that is the truth or not. I said that after all our years together, your lack of respect for me was astonishing. I finished by saying that I would never be able to look at myself in the mirror again if I condoned that level of disrespect and stayed with you. I said I hope we can go our separate ways quietly and that I have an appointment with a lawyer later in the week. I again asked her to find some other accommodations and she simply said, I am not going anywhere. We are not getting a divorce. I will give you all the time you need and do whatever you need to recover from this. We will get past this. She has asked me to go to marriage counseling, which I refused. Why would I go to counseling? I did nothing to warrant needing a therapist's advice. I had her served and gave her a notice to vacate. The house is my premarital asset. She has moved in with her mom, but I find her constantly coming by to see if I need anything or making suggestions like what if we had an open relationship only on your side or threesomes, which seems kind of desperate and pathetic. I had to constantly remind her and tell her she has to call to ask permission before coming by, and finally seems to getting through to her that there will be no us going forward. She has said that she will drag the divorce out for as long as possible, so that she can have enough time to fix us. The worst part of all this is telling my daughter that we are getting a divorce and why, followed closely by her begging me to give her mom another chance. I am not sure I would have been afforded the same consideration if I was the one who was cheating. My boyfriend's friends are pretending to kidnap me for a proposal. A week ago my BF told me he had a camping trip planned with his friends on Friday today. He said he would have no service and he'll see me on Sunday. He messaged me at 5 a.m. this morning and told me they were hitting the road. Around 8 I went for a run like I usually do on Fridays. I have one headphone in while I do because I was on a work call. While I was running, I noticed a SUV that kept popping up. In hindsight, it looked just like my BF's childhood friend's car. I sent a message to my sister saying to stand by and shared my location. Right after sending the message, I looked up and the SUV was right beside me and someone jumped out and grabbed me. It happened so fast I even dropped my phone on the pavement. I was pulled into this car and I could tell there were at least 2 masked guys in the back before they covered my eyes. In hindsight, they had cartoonish ski masks and black gloves on. I freaked out and resisted like crazy, screaming and kicking. All I could hear was these guys laughing and I could feel one of them holding me down by my arms behind me and the other was holding my legs down at the knees. I don't know how long I was there, but I kept begging them to let me go and crying. I even admit I peed on myself, but I don't think they noticed until we arrived at the house. They pulled me out of the car and I was screaming for help until I was pulled into a house. When the mask on my head was removed, I was on my knees in front of my BF of 2 years. He was staring at me with a confused look before he started to angrily ask his friends what was going on. As I started to adjust to what was going on, I realized he was dressed nicely and there were romantic decorations around the entryway to his house. I realized who he was and what was going on and collapsed into sobs. I probably had a 5-minute panic attack in that car on my way there and another one sitting in the entryway to his house. I was sweaty, wearing soiled yoga pants, flushed with fear, scared for my life. That was all about an hour or 2 ago. My BF took me upstairs and was going to help me get showered and changed, but I wanted to do that alone. I heard yelling and commotion downstairs while I showered, but I don't know what is going on. I'm sitting in his room now holding my shattered phone after crying to my sister about what happened. She lives 1.5 hours away but is speeding over to get me now. I can't stop thinking about what happened, and even though I know now I was never in any danger, I don't think my brain can comprehend it. They were snickering and teasing me in deepened voices about what they were going to do to me. The one that was holding my legs down kept caressing my thighs up and down into the inner area. When the car would brake, his face kept falling into my chest. I don't even know who that was. I just know one of them sounded unsure and kept trying to defuse the situation, but I think it was the driver. Edit 2. I'm working with the police now. This is going to be investigated as a false imprisonment if I press charges. My sense of time was so warped. From where I was picked up to his house was about 7 or 10 minutes in the car. It felt way longer than that. As for the friends, the driver was his childhood best friend who I actually get along with well. He was in tears when he voluntarily arrived at the police station for a statement. The other 2 were friends from his athletics class that he started attending a few months ago. It seems like the 2 guys I didn't know wanted in on what otherwise was supposed to be something more innocent. The original plan was for them to pop out of this car in their funny kidnapping attire and hand me a letter that explained I was being summoned by BF and resistance is futile. Seems like the plan changed as the 2 new friends wanted to shake me up a bit more and make it feel more real. Edit 3. I've had time to calm down and have long talks with my sister. We are going to meet up with my BF for dinner tonight. He has been respectful of my requests for space but has been emotional whenever he thinks about what I went through this morning. His best friend contacted me repeatedly apologizing for allowing it to get that far, but I asked for him to stop and he did. The best friend's fiancé reached out and has been supportive and apologetic, too. I'm astounded at the support I've received here and wish I could thank each of you individually. I've never had anyone other than my sister and BF care for my mental well-being like this.
Of Reddit, what is one piece of advice you wish to tell other men? Never be afraid to admit your mistakes. Do what you like now, don't wait until something before you do what you like. Comparison is the thief of joy. Strive to be content. Perfectly okay to reach out to a buddy if you're not doing well mentally. Check for testicular cancer. Don't forget to date your wife. You're not the main character in anyone's story but your own. What does this mean? 2 main things. Take care of yourself and your goals, because at the end of the day it's your life. Be patient with other people, because you don't know what they're going through. Never take criticism from someone you wouldn't go to for advice. Morgan Freeman. Before marriage, just learn to do everything by yourself. Saves tons of drama. Wash your ass. Stay away from astrology girls. As a seasoned man, my best piece of advice is to be polite. To everyone, it costs nothing and it's one of the few things that people remember. One more thing, listening. If you can give someone your undivided attention for just a few minutes, you become a hero.
Students, how do you ace all of your exams? I use the Pomodoro method, and it helped me land my place at Yale for fall 24. I'm a terrible procrastinator, so I'd be cramming for some midterm at 11 p.m. the night before the exam. I noticed that although I believed I was doing the best I absolutely could, both my quality of life and grades suffered. Instead of A's, I would settle for a solid B or C, and while that isn't terrible, it isn't ideal. So one day, after spending all day grinding an essay midterm to the night off, I realized my life needed to change. When I even tried to start my assignments and studying early on, I would find myself staring at the wall, counting how many cracks were in it. Absolutely anything could distract me. I always felt on edge and terribly anxious during exams because of my methods. I mean, why wouldn't I be nervous? I would literally put my grade up to some invisible outside force to hopefully give me an automatic 100. So, as usual, I started searching for some method that could get me to study for another last-minute exam. Everything led to the same method, the Pomodoro method. When I first saw it, I genuinely thought it was some lame tip teachers would give you. But when I tried it out, it actually helped me concentrate. This method consists of 5 steps. First, you choose what you're going to focus on. Second, you'd set a 25-minute timer. Third, you'd focus nonstop during those 25 minutes on the task you chose. Put your phone in your drawers, grab a drink, and just use the timer as a free pass on full-on grinding time. The 4th step is the best part, you actually get a break. My attention span is very short, so when I study, I feel like I'm about to die of boredom. The 5-minute break allows me to release all that excessive energy while I'm studying because, if I'm being honest, I'd rather talk to my girl than study for some AP US history exam. Now, after that 5 minutes is up, you'd repeat this whole process until the 4th or 5th time, and then you get a 20-minute break this time. I'm not going to lie, it's going to take a few times doing this to get used to it, but I was able to finish a lot in the time for non-stop work. So much so that when it came down to getting my GPA up for application season, I started studying using this method, and my grades started to go up because of one main reason. I was actually learning the content this time. Before, I just try to take up as much content as I could in my memory, but I'd dump it the first chance I got. I genuinely started using this method to learn, and I actually retained that info. So much so that when I wrote my Yale application, they admitted me due to my GPA and weirdly informative essay. I used to kind of hate school before, and now I can get all my work done quickly and somehow enjoy learning. Please try it out, it doesn't hurt to learn.
What should never have gotten popular? The stupid public pranks on strangers where it's more or less just harassment. Microtransactions. Giving obnoxious people a platform, see Dr. Phil and his gaggle of guests who are famous for being stupid. Toddlers and tiaras. Child beauty pageants. Bottled water for like $3 as an alternative to soft drinks. Reality TV/celebrity obsession/Kardashian style shows. Doing stupid shit for clout. Welp, this entire thread has reminded me that I'm 50. The Real Housewives of Anywhere. Reality TV. Kardashians and the Jenners. Honey Boo Boo. K-Cup pods. Acting like AC/*NT to prove how street or tough you are. It's pathetic. Particularly when filming yourself for useless internet points on anti-social media.
My dad raised me like a son and I can't thank him enough. My father, a single parent, raised me, 19 female, like how men would stereotypically raise boys. I have 2 brothers too, so it's not like he doesn't have anyone to vicariously live through. He's a mechanic and made me work around the house with woodwork, electricity, repairing cars and motorcycles, all the male-coded hobbies which I hated at the time. He never dated because he said no one would replace my mom and he didn't have any sisters who could help me. I hated it. I hated being the only girl in a family of 3 men. I hated not having anyone to play dress up with, or talk about hairstyles and makeup, or have girl talk or cry about boys and all. I didn't know what periods were until I had them and freaked the heck out. The bare minimum of such stuff was explained to me by his sister-in-law over the phone who lives in a different state. In short, I hated not having an older female presence in the house who would tell me how things work and just be with me. My dad never discouraged me from doing girly stuff, but he never really understood it, so I kept it to myself and did all his stuff with him just to be able to spend time with him. He wasn't also very much in touch with his emotions, thank you patriarchal society, but got emotional only when talking about my mum, which was so rare that I never talked about what I felt just to not burden him. That sort of distanced him from me. But after a freak accident resulted in his death, we found out he left the house to my brothers and I'm living there because it's close to my college and both my brothers moved out before I did. Living on my own for the first time, I realized 2 things. 1, my dad tried his best to do things for me that he had absolutely no idea how to. 2, he taught me how to be fully independent. I don't even have to watch a YouTube tutorial to know how to repair the microwave, or change the tires or the oil of my car, or make the car work enough when I'm stranded and have no help. I now keep a mini set of tools on me out of habit, and I can't explain how much that has helped me in situations I never even anticipated. I'd never have to call an electrician or a contractor to do something for the house unless it's absolutely huge. I would technically never have to depend on anyone, men or women, to do these things for me. Dad, I'm sorry for you having to deal with all my teenage angst without mum. You have taught me more than what most people don't learn despite having both parents in the picture. Your life has set a standard for me regarding my lifestyle, my studies, my love life, everything. The way you brought up brothers and me has helped all 3 of us so much in our life. I'm sorry I never got to say this to you, but I hope you know how I turned out to be. You have made me into a woman who wouldn't have to depend on others for things just because her father never taught her that. You raised me to believe in love despite mum never being around. I hope you are with her wherever you are. I miss you and I love you.
Couples who got married on the basis, if we're both not married by X years old, will marry each other. How did things work out? We met when we were 18 and made the agreement at 20 that if we were both single at 30 we would get married. We dated other people for a while. If I was single she had a boyfriend, if she was single I had a girlfriend. But we always went to each other's family events and holidays, even if a significant other was in the picture for either one of us. One night when I was 25 I was out to dinner with my then girlfriend for a friend's birthday going away party and then girlfriend and I got into it because she didn't want to be there and was mad I wanted to stay. Best friend was moving from the Midwest to Seattle and we had known each other our whole lives and lived together through college. I told her I would get her an Uber back to my apartment, but I was staying and we would talk when alcohol wasn't involved. My sister called right after. She ran into my friend at a festival a few hours away. They had a chat, and she told my sister she loved me, but didn't want to get in the way of my relationship. My sister knew it was rocky already and called me with her to tell me. As it turned out, I had loved my best friend for years but the timing was never right. Broke up with then girlfriend the next day, went to visit best friend that night. We were dating by the end of that night, engaged 6 months after, and now, at 30, have been married 4 years with an almost 3-year-old daughter.
What was the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you? When I was 15 I was a typical kid who rubbed one out frequently. Nothing unusual. We did not have fancy electronics but what we did have was one of those huge, old desktop PCs that stood pride of place in our living room. My whole family had gone out. My sisters were out doing separate things with their friends and my parents were at some charity dinner thing. It was just me, all alone with the house to myself for a couple of hours. So, naturally, I did the usual, played music loud, recreated the scene from Risky Business, ordered food and played Halo on Xbox. Finally came the time that I began to really enjoy myself. I pulled up the usual go-to websites but tonight something wasn't right. Nothing was really doing it for me. So, I traveled through video after video, image after image but in vain, until I clicked a link that took me to an unknown, exterior site. I finally found an appropriate video and as I clicked around to try and get the video playing, something popped up. The pop-up ad wasn't your normal corn ad with someone who's 3 miles away needs it. This was different. When the ad loaded, I crapped myself. The pop-up had an image of a terror group on the main banner and a stern warning that said something along the lines of "We have been filming what you've been doing. We will release the footage unless you pay us this amount of money." Now, you're probably thinking why didn't you just close it down and get back to business? These tricky little scamming people make it harder than that. Didn't have a normal close button like all other web pages, it was stuck on my screen. I frantically tried everything I could to get it off to no avail. Then I had a brainwave, if I powered down the PC then boot it back up it might go away. I proceeded to turn off the PC, unplug it and then turn it back on. It took a while to boot up. This felt like a lifetime because my dignity was on the line. I couldn't let my parents found out I was watching this stuff, let alone that I was being extorted by terror groups for it. It finally booted back up and all seemed normal until I went to my browser. As soon as I double-clicked, bam, it was there again, staring at me, judging me. Knew I was in deep trouble. I was either going to be exposed online rubbing one out, or my parents were going to find out that I was rubbing one out. After some time thinking, I collected myself and decided to power it down and come clean to my parents. That was better than people seeing me do it for sure. I waited for what seemed like hours for my parents to get back. As soon as I heard them arrive, I broke down crying and apologized to them over and over for what I had done. I explained everything. It all came out. The corn, the terror group, the ransom, the virus-ridden PC. Thankfully, they were pretty chill about it. I booted the PC back up which seemed to take even longer than before. My heart was pounding as I waited for them to see the full range of my shame. Finally, the familiar green hills and sky blue background filled the screen. Dad opened the browser, double-clicked and, as I held my breath, Google popped up. No groups, no extortion, no corn, just normal Google homepage. My parents both looked at me and burst out laughing. I stood there not knowing what the hell to do. I'd come clean about everything and nothing was there to back me up. What was your high school's wildest scandal? A girl's boyfriend sent explicit photos and videos of her around school. They spread very quickly and even teachers had seen the videos by one point, which was extra messed up as she was 16. For some reason this sparked some sort of hatred towards her, and she ended up with no friends at all. Nobody wanted anything to do with her and she was shamed a lot for it. But he was totally fine, no one ostracized him. She still stayed with her boyfriend, but she seemed really sad all the time and started hurting herself. He became really grabby with her in public from then on, too. He would start making her sit on his lap at lunch and having his hands up her shirt in the hallways and stuff. There was something going on there that I wasn't aware of. It was all very dodgy. I had a fair few classes with her and made an extra effort to partner up with her and sit by her when possible. We weren't close by any means, but I think having an acquaintance that talked to her normally and didn't shun her helped her a little, at least. I never got the full story but that video was seen by most of the school somehow. Everyone was whispering about her for a solid couple of weeks and she was a social outcast for years until she left school. I found out that the video portrayed her using a cucumber to go to town on herself. Granted, I realized why people were weirded out, but I was still cool about it. Different strokes for different folks. But the fact that her boyfriend did that to her, and yet she was the one getting punished, while he faced no repercussions, didn't sit right with me in the slightest. Who was the person that you got in bed with that made you go, I never thought this would happen? I was married with a child when a friend of mine started dating the sexiest man I had ever seen. I would visit her Instagram constantly just to drool over the man. He was literally my dream man, and I knew I stood no chance and would never get him. They eventually break up, and I never see his gorgeous face again. He didn't post any pictures on his own social media, and I would still occasionally reminisce how gorgeous he is and only dream to have a man that good looking one day. A few years later, I find myself divorced at 35 with 2 kids and figure I'll have a pretty small pool of men interested. One day I was arguing over the internet about feminism, and a guy was making some dickhead comment, and we went back and forth for a bit. That led to DMs, then text. Turns out he was making jokes in poor taste. He turned out to be a feminist. He just has a dark side of humor and it's hard to read sarcasm over the internet. After a lot more talking and I realized that he was the gorgeous ex of my friend, with the fighting slowly turning into flirting. We met up 2 days later at a bar. We hit it off great and talked about a lot of things. One thing led to the next, and we had sex in my car that night. That night in the cramped backseat of my Altima is still the best sex I have ever had. It literally felt like a dream and I felt like I was 20 again. The chemistry was insane. And he is great in bed. Turns out he doesn't mind being a stepdad to 2 kids either. We have been together for 4 years and got married in October. He's a great dad and a great husband. I still look at him and can't believe I get to have adult movie level sex with him for the rest of my life.
My wife is different from when I married years ago. I think most married women with a toxic relationship with their husband/wife would say this, but my wife is actually different from what she was when I married her. I married my wife about 6 to 7 years ago. She was perfect, I mean it. She would help me through everything. We both liked physical contact but also quality time, so we would show our love in similar ways. Back in high school I would be bullied and teased for being bisexual. Nowadays I think people are more accepting, but I only had a few that actually accepted me. One of them was my wife. We would always hang out and do some stupid shit like go out into the forest and get lost or prank some guy who we happened to call one day. Eventually it turned into a relationship. She would cook actual meals, while I would make simple baked cookies or cupcakes. I would clean and she would help. We liked the same music, movies, books, and games. Like everything, I think I keep talking about how perfect she was and how we got together because she just isn't like that anymore. It started a year ago, so it's hard to remember. She was on her phone scrolling through TikTok. I was cooking some eggs for us both that morning. I asked her, "Hey, do you want it scrambled or?" And she didn't respond. I didn't think it was unusual because she was focused on her phone and I usually zone out on my phone too. I walked over to her and asked her, "Hey, did you hear me? What you watching?" She looked up at me smiling. She answered with a simple tick-tock. I was weirded out a bit, but I didn't care. She eventually went with sunny side up for her egg, I think. As we were eating, she mentioned something about going on vacation. I smiled. "Where? We can always take a week off of work." And she didn't answer. She kept her head down and I remember being a bit concerned. It was quiet for a few minutes until she sprung up and told me she wanted to go to the Philippines. I stayed quiet for a whole minute until I smiled and said okay. I remember her smiling cutely. I covered my mouth and blushed. I was still completely in love with her. For the rest of the month of preparing for the trip, I remember that smile. I bought us tickets, new clothes, and then saved up the rest of the money so I could buy her any souvenirs she wanted. Then the day of the trip came and woke up early and woke her up. I went to our room after turning on the car to check on her. She wasn't there. So I knocked on the bathroom door and asked if she was in there. She was. I patiently waited for her. We only had half an hour left and I was sure we were gonna miss our flight at that point. I started tearing up and panicking, but I told her to hurry up in the most calm way possible. She came out and frowned at me. I cocked my eyebrow and asked her why the FCK she wasn't ready for the vacation she wanted. I remember being extremely upset, and I snapped at her words, "I don't want to go." I scoffed. "You're joking." She rolled her eyes and looked angry at me at that point. "Did you just roll your eyes? I'm the one who spent all this money on this trip? Do you know how much I prepared for this trip for you? Get in the F-king car. I don't give a SHT if you're not ready." I wasn't prepared to give up this trip. I spent at least $1,000 or more on this trip, and just because she didn't want to go was not an excuse for me. I knew that I was being irrational and I hadn't got angry at her ever in this relationship. I was worried for me and her when I calmed down, and when we got to the airport we had 5 minutes before the flight. I apologized and she frowned. The vacation was normal and we eventually both forgot about this moment. It wasn't anything to worry about then. A few months ago, I had this recurring dream of her. For a while I couldn't remember it, I just knew I kept having it. I would wake up in a cold sweat and look at her, and know she was there all cozy and comfortable, and go back to sleep. One day I suddenly woke up, but I remember the dream so vividly. In the dream, she would run around me like a little kid. I would smile and laugh, and then I would see her fall down with tears and her eyes would turn red and pale. She would vomit blood and then I would wake up. I checked on her, then the image of her eyes started making me panic. I turned her over and saw her pale body. My anxiety spiked and shook her crying. She looked at me with her eyes. Her beautiful green eyes, and I calmed down and broke down. I told her the dream and hugged her. She didn't try to reassure me and say she was okay. She just looked at me and told me in a soft voice, "You saw what you weren't meant to see." And I remembered being too tired and all my adrenaline had came and gone too fast, so I just laid down and cried a bit more before sleeping. When I woke up, I saw a pile of blood on the side of the bed she always slept on. Naturally I assumed it was the time of the month for her and she just bled through. Then I wiped my eyes and focused on how much blood it was. It was the size of a fat cat laying down. I start to panic and hyperventilate. I get up and look for my wife. I dialed the police just in case, but I didn't call them. I saw her on the floor, on all fours. All her limbs were crooked and I shrieked, and I had one last gasp of air before falling onto the floor and covering my mouth. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and pounced at me. I jumped back and got up running. I can't remember a lot of this. I just know I ended up in our bathroom looking at the mirror while locking the door. All I heard from outside the door other than the banging was her sweet voice distorting into "I love you." I had already called the police and I couldn't get words out. All I said was, "Help me, my wife." Then all noises had stopped. All I heard was this dripping of a liquid, which I guessed was blood, and then a knock from the front door. Luckily we had a window in our bathroom, so I opened it and yelled, "Over here," because I knew damn well I wasn't going out that door. The police came into my house and escorted me out. The walls were covered in blood and I realized the bathroom was too, so I looked down and my legs had been slashed open. Then this immense pain just started and I collapsed. I was sent to the hospital. My parents had disowned me, my whole family actually. So I had nobody. Not one person I thought even cared came either. Once I recovered I got my stuff from the house and left. I left the country to go to Europe. I decided to go to the UK since that's the only place I could think of at that moment. I went through a mental crisis. Everything reminded me of her sweet kind presence. I wondered how I could have saved her. After about half a year since it happened I decided to go online and searched up what it could have been. I started talking to this person and they told me, the norovirus. I searched it up and it was really similar to what happened. This virus starts and you're supposed to stay close to home. It'll have a small voice in your head that tells you to go out of the country to this certain place and tricks you into thinking that it's a sign that something good will happen, when in reality once you go there the virus starts slowly to have complete control over your body. The reason for it trying to get you to get out of the country is so the person is in a complete different environment. Their body will have to take time to get used to it, and the virus takes advantage of it. The place it chooses is where the virus home is. Some people are able to escape this train of thought, and even when the trip is in a day they realize the voice is a trick and try to stop going to this trip the best they can. For a bit, I couldn't think of any moment where we went out of the country, then the Philippines trip came into mind. I was the one who done that to her. I made her go on that trip. Why didn't she tell me? I would have understood. Maybe the way I lashed out scared her. She suffered because of me. It's been about a year since it happened. I feel sorry.
Today I messed up when I learned the language my girlfriend speaks when she gossips with her friends. My girlfriend is South African. Her native language is Afrikaans. I've been learning how to speak Afrikaans without my girlfriend knowing. I secretly applied for online courses that I've been using on and off for more than a year now. My plan was to surprise my girlfriend and her family with my American Afrikaans when I finally meet her parents in person for the first time later this year. I never intended to eavesdrop or anything, but learning Afrikaans in secret accidentally exposed me to sensitive information that my girlfriend was sharing on the phone with her Afrikaans-speaking friends from South Africa. It was gossip I was not supposed to understand, but eventually I did. This is what I've heard in the past few months. 1. My girlfriend is planning to surprise me on my birthday by reuniting with her high school metal band and putting on a show for me. 2. My girlfriend wants to tattoo the names of literally all the Harry Potter spells on her back, but she doesn't know how to tell me because she's afraid I'll talk her out of it. 3. My girlfriend casually mentioned that one of the unexpected differences between her glasses and her contact lenses is that when she's on her knees looking up at me with her glasses on, my schlong looks much bigger compared to what it looks like through her contact lenses, which is why she's keeping her glasses on during lovemaking. Ouch. 4. My girlfriend is convinced that my parents are swingers because apparently there are always attractive couples hanging out at my mom and dad's house whenever we visit. I've better call Saul without me even though we agreed to finish it together, so now she's pretending to have no idea how the show ends. School metal band reunion for my birthday because she's no longer sure if it's appropriate to team up with two of her exes that are original members of the band. I would have preferred not knowing most of those things, to be honest, but there is no way for me to unlearn Afrikaans, so now I'm cursed with knowing too much while having to pretend I know nothing. Have you ever had a really bad feeling about a place, and immediately abandoned what you were doing, and got the hell out of there? I was dating a guy who had been in the Navy. We were in Amsterdam. I was curious about the red light district. I wanted to see it for myself. It was winter and about 11 p.m. As soon as we got to the cobblestone area I began to feel uneasy. I don't know why. I didn't want to tell my boyfriend because he's older and had been in the Navy. I should feel safe with him. We strolled around looking at the girls. I actually felt sad for them. Not all were pretty and they didn't look happy. It felt a little depressing actually, and I felt bad for gawking. The deeper in we got the deeper I felt unsettled. Something weird was in the air. I've been everywhere and lived in some of the toughest cities in America. It's rare for me to feel uneasy. I looked at my boyfriend and I was like, please don't think I'm weird, but I keep feeling like we are in danger. I feel weird, like something weird is gonna happen. He took one look at me, said nothing and grabbed my hand. He got us out of there and it felt like a maze of cobblestone streets and red lights. Finally we were in the main square again. Well lit with people. I could breathe. I asked him why he was so hasty. I had expected him to put up an argument or call me jealous or something. What he said to me sticks with me to this day. He said in the service sometimes you would get an eerie feeling like something was going to happen before it did. He said if you feel that way, get the hell out. No questions asked. No time for talk, get the hell out of there. I never really have had that feeling since, but the minute I told him how I felt he went from casually strolling to the very brisk fast walk the hell out of there.
My golden child brother destroyed my grandfather's heirloom, so I exposed his inappropriate relationship. My brother has been a golden child since the day he was born. My parents desperately wanted a son, and when they had him, all of their attention was shifted onto him. As I was the older sister, I was left behind a lot, and neglected severely. The neglect was bad. I would go hungry some nights because my brother wanted a second portion of food and I was forced to give him my plate. Girls are meant to be skinny anyway, my mother would say to me whenever she did this. My birthday was not even celebrated most years, and when it was I would get a few cupcakes. I don't remember getting a single birthday present past the age of 10 from my parents. My brother took glory in this too. The entitlement spoiled him a lot. He never failed to bask in the fact that he was better than me, that he was the favorite, and he was a bully too. I had a lot of bruises from him, and being a girl I could not fight back a lot. Whenever his birthday came around, he would show off his presents to me, knowing that a few months ago when it was my birthday, I got nothing. This was one of the ways he made sure I knew I was inferior to him. I had enough when I was 16 after a particular event. It was my birthday. I woke up knowing it was not going to be celebrated heavily, but this year I was hopeful it would be different. A few weeks ago I told my parents I would love it if my birthday was celebrated this year, and I was not asking for extravagant presents, just a nice cake and perhaps a family dinner at a restaurant of my choosing. They agreed, and being excited, I booked a restaurant for us four for my birthday. Well, when my birthday came, there was no cake. Cool, whatever, maybe dinner will still go ahead. The table was reserved for 6 p.m., and when 5 p.m. rolled around, my parents told me they are taking my brother go-karting and that I can order myself some pizza later. They're going for food later, and won't be back till late. They left before I said anything, and I cried a lot. That was the day I moved out to my grandfather's house. I was gone with my belongings before they came home. My grandfather was the only person who understood me. He gave me presents. I was never hungry at his. He was my comfort person. When my parents found out I was gone, they called me, and when I explained that I would like to live with my grandfather, my mother responded with a lukewarm, "If that's what you want." None of my family spoke to me for the next 7 years. The next time I saw them was my grandfather's funeral. We made small talk, and I found out that my brother was 21 with no driver's license, not in school, dropped out of high school, still living at our parents', had no job, and had a 16-year-old girlfriend. It was appalling for me to realize that my parents were okay with him leaving all of them, but it did not surprise me. Well, at the funeral I was wearing my grandfather's watch, a watch he left for me, and a watch that was priceless to me. It was not a watch I planned to wear a lot, just on special occasions, and of course I wore it to the funeral as a way to commemorate him. My mother told me that the watch looked expensive, and I told her I do not care about that. Well, she butted in, suggesting I sell the watch and give the money to my brother. Apparently my brother was looking at getting a place for him and his girlfriend, and needed some money. I suggested to my parents that they should help him out, but they said that they did not have any money. She said she also knew I was doing not bad for myself financially and can afford to do this for my brother. I did not engage in this conversation. I didn't even bother to explain my answer. I simply told her no. For the next few months my family and I did not talk, and I thought that was that. But my mother reached out asking to come over, and promised not to talk about me lending money at the dinner. I agreed. In hindsight I do not know why. I think she pressured me into saying yes, as I did tell her I wasn't sure, but she kept pressing. Either way, my parents and my brother came over the next week. The dinner went well, but that night I noticed that my watch was gone. It was there earlier in the day. I knew that. I saw it. I searched the house to make sure and confirmed that it was not in my house. My family had to have taken it. I called my mother, and to no surprise she denied it at first. I pressed her over and over, and it was only when I bluffed about having cameras in my house and pressing charges that she cracked. She told me my brother took it and plans to sell it. I told her if he goes through with it I will press charges. I will drag them through the mud, and I expect the watch to be returned to me tomorrow. She tried to yell at me, but I hung up. I sent her a text right after telling her she has until tomorrow night to present me with the watch. Well, she came over the next day with my watch. At first I thought it was a miracle. I was going to get my watch back without any trouble, but as always with my parents, it was not so easy. The watch was broken, it was cracked badly, and it would cost a lot of money to fix. I asked my mother what this was, and she said with a grin, "Your watch. I hope you're not too angry. I accidentally dropped it," chimed in my brother. I saw red at that point and exploded at them. I yelled at them so loud that the neighbors came out and my parents drove off. I spent an hour looking at the watch and crying. I managed to get in touch with someone willing to fix the watch, thankfully, but I could not allow my brother to do such an awful thing and go unpunished. So what I did was quite petty, I have to admit, but it's also something that my brother has coming. I went onto my IG and messaged my brother's girlfriend. "Here is a picture of what your boyfriend did to my grandfather's watch. The watch I cherished." I then went on to say what my brother and parents put me through when I was younger, as well as our backstory. I also asked her if she thought that a 21-year-old man dating a 16-year-old was normal. She thanked me, and I can guess she left him, because I got so many angry messages and calls from my family blaming me, calling me a vengeful bitch and all sorts of names. I think I'm going to go no contact, and potentially even report my brother's relationship to the police, as his girlfriend revealed to me that he was physically and intimately abusive at times too.
What is the funniest thing you have done to your wife? I just blocked my own wife on Facebook. I never really got a good education, and I've always been a $40,000 a year guy, which is $20 an hour. My wife and I have been married for 20 years and have a 9-year-old daughter. In 2017, I landed a much better job that paid $70,000 to do oil industry shit that I'll never understand. But hey, it pays well. This job really boosted our living quality. My wife was able to work part-time during that. And in 2019, we bought a house. In 2020 the pandemic came, and I lost my job. Jobs were hard to find during that period of time, so I collect unemployment for a month, then went to work in a warehouse for $15 an hour. She got a job at the same warehouse for the same amount of money. Sweet. Both of us combined to make what I used to make alone. But that's not too bad, we'll be fine. We were determined to keep our house. After only a week, she decides she can't handle working 40 hours a week, so she quits. And then after realizing I cannot make enough to sustain the family, she makes this post on Facebook, talking down on me for not doing enough for my family after she quits the job. I wanted to reply, but didn't want to be that guy on Facebook, so I blocked her. I've had her complaining at me every day after I come home, and even her parents had called me to berate me. I'm thinking of just walking away. I feel like she's totally in the wrong for being too lazy to work a 40-hour week, or even working part-time, like she used to do. Some might say, stay-at-home mom is a hard job too. You need to appreciate her for it. Normally, I would agree, and I respect all stay-at-home parents. But she doesn't do shit. She's usually stoned and drunk and doesn't even know where our 9-year-old daughter is. The house is also trashed when I get home. I won't ask her where our daughter is, and she always responds with, "She's at the neighbor's kid's house." Which is wrong, my daughter is usually at her best friend's house 1 street over. My wife doesn't even know my daughter's best friend's name. It's not fair for me or my daughter. I just want to leave this bitch but don't know how. I think my cousin wants to bang me. Though essentially I believe my cousin might want to have sex with me. He has never outright said this. Though there are a few things that lead me to believe that the way he acts towards me might not be the most normal. When I go to family gatherings with him, he always wants me and him to talk alone in a secluded room. This started a few years ago, when our cousin-cousin relationship began to develop. Growing up we were not very close. Though as time went on we started to talk about our relationships and life issues. Then it started to become a thing where me and him would always spend all the time alone together. Any family gathering, me and him would spend it alone in a room talking. The entire time. I started to feel that it was crossing some boundaries. Though I am not close with any of my other cousins at all. I have never formed relationships with any of them. When I was explaining to him how my past relationship was, how I acted, and what created the downfall, he told me that I would be the perfect girlfriend and wife. I was very surprised by this statement. Though I didn't say much. After that comment, he started to talk more personal to me. Even talking about some of his own preferences. Not in detail, but he was hinting towards things. He even offered to do substances with me. I don't know any of my other cousins who ever offered such a thing. In a few months, our next family event is coming up. He did express how he wanted to spend more time with me alone. I still feel like this crosses a line a bit. It is also something about how he talks to me, and even looks at me. That makes me feel like he is not holding me in the way as a cousin should. I also don't know how I should approach this topic with him. I joked with my boyfriend that I should just say, "Do you want to have sex with me?" Although he told me that he'd never admit to it. Which is true.
Parents, what spooky past life memory did your kid utter? Was watching an old video of a jazz drummer playing a solo. No idea who it was, but he was really good. My daughter, probably age 3, was looking over my shoulder for a minute before she said, "I used to play the drums like that when I was a man." When I was 4, my parents and I went to my aunt's farm. The wind started picking up and I looked back at my parents and said, "Gotta tie the hay bale down in the wind." That's how David died. To this day no one knows who David is. My little brother said when he was 3 or 4, when I was a grown-up I went to war and I never came back. My nephew, around 2 or 3, would talk about his other mom and then look confused when you asked him to elaborate. She's not here now. Might have been daddy's girlfriend. My 5-year-old daughter said to me, "I was in your belly twice, mama." The first time I died before I came out, but I came back. I did lose my first pregnancy 8 months before getting pregnant again. She was never told. I don't know what it was, but that's what happened.
I don't work here, and you're not a customer here. A new breed of Karen. Just had a great experience at my work, kinda. But worth it, Australian-based. Before I get into it, and just to add a bit of background, I have been a manager in my line of work for over a decade now, and we deal with rude people all the time. I have zero patience for rude people and I give it back exactly how it's given to me. At my work I do the post office run each morning, dropping and collecting mail from our P.O. box. Great chance to get out of the office and create new long ways back to work, haha. Today we had a parcel pickup slip in there, nothing unusual with that, we get them all the time. So I collect the parcel and take it back to work with the other mail. When I get back to my desk I notice that the parcel is from Amazon, addressed to someone who doesn't work here but has our office P.O. box details. There is also a contact number for her on the parcel sticker. So being the kind, caring gentleman that I am, I give her a call. It goes to her voicemail, so I leave a detailed message about the situation and how to contact me. Moments later I get a call back on my desk phone. Me, "Good afternoon, company name, this is my name speaking." Her, "I had a missed call from this number but I have no idea why you would be calling me because I'm not interested in anything you are selling." Me, "Oh no, that's okay, I don't want to sell you anything." Her name, "Is it? We had a parcel in our P.O. box addressed to you. Did you want to come to our office to pick it up?" Her, "Why do you have a key to my P.O. box?" Me, "Well, actually it's our P.O. box, we have had the same one for 3 years now, so." Her, explodes, "No, I tease my P.O. box and that's illegal. Why do you have a key to my P.O. box? I want to speak your manager." Me, "Okay, go for it, I'm the manager." Her, "Well, why do you have access to my mail?" She yells this whole conversation but I got sick of writing in caps. Me, "I don't. I have access to my mailbox. I go every day and have never seen your mail in my box before, so explain to me why you think you have access to mine. You do realize that I am from company name, right?" Her, in a moment of unexpected clarity from her, "Well, my P.O. box is explains full address dash, which is almost our address as we have 2 post offices nearby, but hers needs the suburb name then east added to it. Easy." Me, "Oh, I understand now, sorry. Well, yeah, looks like Amazon or Australia Post hasn't added the detail to the label sticker, so it's come to the main post office." Haha, whoops, trying to calm her a bit. Her, "Well, when I made the order I put my details in as I always do. That's how I have them saved on my Amazon profile too, so why did it get sent to you?" Me, getting sick of going back and forth with something I have absolutely no time to deal with. "How would I know, mate? I don't work for Amazon or the post office. I literally picked up our P.O. box mail and your parcel was with it. I didn't have to call, but I did. I have nothing to do with your mail or your order details. As I've said multiple times now, I am from company name." Her, "Well, this needs to be escalated, and you will need to drop that parcel at my house ASAP because it's urgent." Me, at this point I thought my nose started bleeding from inner rage. What the hell, what's not being understood here? Her, "Well then take my parcel back to the post office and tell them about the error." Me, I have absolutely no authority to take a parcel back and have them amend the address. Nope, not gonna happen. You need to come and get it from me or I can take it back and they will return it to Amazon. I probably could have done more, but really, F her. Her, this is urgent medicine I need. Me, you buy urgent medicine from Amazon? And they mark it as beauty products on the customs declaration? Bit odd. Her, that's none of your business. Me, yeah, exactly. None of this should be my business. Now come and get your parcel and stop blowing up at me. Her, completely unacceptable behavior. I want to lodge a complaint. Me, you're not a customer of ours? You have no grounds to complain, I'm trying to help you. Her, where is your office? I will come right now and you better have some answers for me. Me, beautiful, our address is blank, can't wait to catch up, see you then. She hangs up. I imagine she has slammed down her phone and absolutely obliterated it because of how angry she was. Her hands shaking from rage, she cleans the froth from the sides of her mouth, grabs her handbag, makes sure she is carrying her Karen ID, and heads to her new Ford WD that she uses for only city travel. Myself and the other office staff share a great laugh over it. We are currently pacing the room waiting for her to get here. Everyone wants to witness this pure stupidity firsthand. The call was now 3 hours ago, still not here. We'll keep you all updated in the comments. When were you the bad guy in someone else's story? I work in local print news. In 2016 Hurricane Matthew hit us and about a week later the river that runs through our county started flooding. It took several days but I think it ultimately crested at 28 feet. All told, from the day the storm hit us until the day the water receded and roads opened back up the whole experience lasted about a month. That's a month of not getting much sleep, working 6 days a week, working some on your day off, not having much to eat because trucks can't get to your grocery stores. Anyway, in the middle of all this I was out in a neighborhood that was half flooded. Like everyone on the left side of the street was mostly dry, maybe some water in the yard or driveway, everyone on the other side had their car completely underwater. I met this gentleman who had come back to check on his house with his wife. They had no power, but they were dry and happy about it. While I interviewed him he mentioned that he was in no rush to leave again. He'd been staying with his mother-in-law and she was driving him insane. I quoted him on that, even mentioning that he was joking when he said it, 'cause he was. I thought it was a nice moment of levity in what was otherwise kind of a bleak situation. His mother-in-law did not agree. He called me the next day and was clearly trying to dig his way out of the doghouse for that remark. I got an earful. Probably deserved it. When we later made a special edition with all of our stories and pictures from the flood, we took that line out of the story as a favor for him. Sorry my dude. Guys, what's the most down bad you have ever been? I started talking to this girl one night after she messaged me through social media. We began talking about common interests with subtle flirting here and there. The following day I asked her to send a photo of herself. She proceeded to send 4 pictures, 2 of which she was in baggy clothing, the other 2 being top angles. All of these photos had 2 things in common. All had filters, and all hid what everything below her neck looked like. I instantly suspected she was a beluga. After talking for a little while, our conversation shifted to a more intimate context. She told me about some of her fantasies such as getting tied down and tickled. I refused to follow through with that one but told her I'd fulfill some of her other ones. We made a plan for her to sneak over while my parents were out of my house the next day. Well, the next day rolls around and we talk about her coming over, which she later does. After waiting an hour for her bus to get to my house, I waited outside so she knew which house was mine. As she walks to my driveway, I noticed something about her. Not only was she hiding her body for good reason, but she was also very unattractive in person. Maybe a solid 2 out of 10. To put the cherry on top of the cake, she smelled like a mix of body odor and cigarettes. Me, not wanting to be rude as she had just traveled across town to do the devil's tango, walked her into my house and to my room. We put on a show on Netflix and began following through with what we had previously talked about, excluding the tickling. After finishing up what was and will be my worst intimate experience ever, we both just sat there. The post-nut was crazy. I actually went into my bathroom and took a long and hard look at myself in the mirror. I'm pretty sure a tear even streamed down my eye. I came back out and sat down. I sat there thinking about how I could get her out of my house without being rude. I finished a glass of water and said I was going to go fill it. I quickly pulled out my phone and bribed my sister to come knock on my door and tell me my parents were home early and that they needed me to help them unload groceries. I told her I was sorry and that I needed to go help. I told her to take the next bus, which was 20 minutes later. For the next 2 hours I sat there smelling like her and deeply regretting everything I'd just done. This inspired me to go do household chores to keep my mind off of what happened.
What perfectly true story of yours sounds like an outrageous lie. Moving interstate, all our belongings on the little trailer, pulled over the side of the road so my significant other could pee, too close to the side of the road, and the trailer slid down a small ditch, not enough to wreck the car but too steep for our little car to pull out. Next thing you know, a white minibus pulls up, and out jumps a half-dozen guys who were a weightlifting team from I think Argentina. It was 25 years ago, not sure now. They lifted our trailer up onto the road, climbed back in their van, and drove off. My stepdaughter acquired a guinea pig that, big surprise, turned out to be pregnant. She gave birth to 2 normal babies and a runt that was too weak to walk or drink milk from the mother. The little guy was on the way out, so I got my stepdaughter to hold the mother in a sort of sitting position while I squeezed some milk out of a nipple that was about the size of a decent pimple. I jammed the baby onto the nipple and he finally got the idea, drinking enough to kickstart his growth, while we held mom still for about 20 minutes. He lived and we eventually gave the 4 of them to someone else. Shortly after, a fox broke into their hutch and ate all of them except the runt.
My boyfriend just bought me a cruise, so I'm breaking up with him. My birthday is coming up in a few months and 3 days ago, I found out what my birthday present was, which are tickets to a cruise. His sister spilled the news thinking I would be excited and I'm not. We live together and I found the gift, but I know it's for me. I sound so ungrateful, but I'm not. This gift just proves to me that things will never change. The first thing is that this gift isn't for me. I do not like cruises because I get really bad seasickness and nothing I do helps. I also told him what I wanted to do for my birthday, which was to go to a Renaissance Fair festival on my birthday. I have already taken the week off from work in preparation to go to this fair. I have purchased tickets and am saving month to month so that I have spending money without it affecting finances at home. Why would he book tickets the same time as the time I took off to go to this festival? Also, this cruise wasn't cheap at all, so it's basically wasted money because I'm not going. I'm so annoyed. I have told him time and time again that I don't feel like he listens to me, that I feel like he just gets me things by thinking about what's best for him or what he would like. It's not only gifts. He makes decisions based on what he thinks is best and I just can't deal with it anymore. I love him, but I'm so done, and before anyone says I didn't talk to him or to talk to him about this, I have repeatedly. This has been a recurring conversation in our 2.5-year relationship. The next thing to do is talk this out and end things. My husband left me penniless and homeless to be with another woman. My husband and I have been homeless for about a year after he was fired from his job. I do work online and have been able to keep a roof over our heads by jumping between motels. He hasn't worked in a year. So on Tuesday, when he said he had a job interview, I was excited. He walked since the truck broke down. He said he needed both phones for numbers, so I gave it to him without thinking about it, but after about an hour he texted me and said he got the job and just had to fill out paperwork. Then I saw 3 expenses on the bank card in the county and knew something wasn't right. Those couple of hours turned into that night and then the next morning. He not only wasn't answering my texts or calls, but he blocked me completely. He had both phones, both bank account cards, and my valid ID. Before I had a chance to cancel the cards because it was my money on there, he had pretty much wiped out the account. I still had a few days left at the motel, so I called around for a place to stay. My dog, cat, and I are safe at the moment, and I open new bank accounts but have to wait on the cards to arrive. I do have a paycheck coming Thursday, though I'm not sure what to do after Monday when I can no longer stay in the motel. My husband contacted his brother just long enough to say he was safe but wouldn't give an answer as to why he left. We've been married for 9 years and we weren't arguing. I just can't fathom why he just left me and our pets with no access to money and tried to clean it completely out, a vehicle, or even a live phone. He knew that most likely we would be out on the streets, but luckily, we did find a temporary haven for a few days. I guess he just found a piece of crap and he wanted more than someone who supported him and was loyal through these bad times. My husband left me penniless and homeless to be with another woman. Since being left homeless by my husband with my motel stay coming to an end, I was in a bad position. Luckily it didn't take long for myself and my pets to get back on track. After getting my new bank account fully set up, I was able to move into a studio apartment I found. It's small but bigger than a motel room and it even has a kitchen. They allow pets and even have a little fenced-in dog play area. I'm still working to beef up my paycheck for the deposits and food because at the moment my pets and I are sharing the same food. After I get settled in, I do have an appointment with legal aid counseling for the area. So, things are definitely looking up. I still haven't heard from my husband and I don't want to. The lawyer I will speak with on Thursday can take over tracking him down. Edit, I received a short email from him, which was the only way he knew how to get in touch, which just said,
Sorry. How are you? My brother told me you got a place and I can't wait to move in. I have missed you, but I needed to get my urges out of my system so I can give you 100%. Call me.
It took a lot out of me not to respond because there was still a lot of hurt and grief being processed. But, I'm proud to say that I just sent a message back with the number of the law office I was going to, then created a filter to send future messages to the trash. The office planned to use some of his text messages as evidence, so I'm not going to stop him from incriminating himself. Who's that one person you dread hanging out with? I'm 18F. My older sister is 26. We are half-sisters, as we share the same dad. We are the only kids to our dad. Our dad and her mom were once married, I wasn't born obviously, and when they divorced my sister lived with her mom 99% of the time. She grew up 4 hours away from us. I only saw her a week out of the year growing up. She would attend some holidays with our dad's side of the family. When she graduated high school, 9 years ago, she lived with our dad and I was seeing her all the time. That's when we built our relationship. My mom and dad live in the same city, so I've always lived 50-50 with my parents. So we have an aunt and uncle on our side that I basically grew up with. Ever since I was 6 I've been staying summers with them out of state up until this year. They also have a son I'm 2 years apart from. They tried to have my sister for summers when she was a child, but because of whatever she never got to. The past 9 years my sister is finally around enough, just like I've been my whole life. I graduated this year and had a party our dad's side attended. My uncle, our dad's brother, booked a trip for us to go to Hawaii. His family and me. And I didn't know my sister didn't know. I didn't want to bring it up at all. When our cousin brought it up at my party, my sister asked out loud, "You guys are going to Hawaii?" And it became awkward as hell. Our uncle and aunt kinda rushed in a room and I just quickly said yay and walked away from the topic. I saw my aunt take her in a room and talk to her. I didn't know what they talked about, nor did I ask until my sister reached out to me yesterday. Basically, she said she's had time to think about that day and said our aunt told her that she's an afterthought because they didn't get to build a relationship with her when she was young. And because of lost time, things are kinda the way they are. My sister said to our aunt that since she's been around the family more now, it's ridiculous she excluded over such a thing she had no control over. She told me that she doesn't appreciate them playing favorites and excluding her and making excuses for it. Also that she didn't care about not going to Hawaii, it's the point. When they claim they wish they were closer to her. She said that they are potentially putting a wedge between us by doing things like this, and that as her sister, I should know how she feels. I told her this had nothing to do with me, and that our aunt has a point with her childhood being the biggest reason things are the way they are. I also told her she was wrong for thinking our aunt was playing favoritism. She told me it's a shame I don't see an issue with this. And that she looks at me different for siding with my aunt. Which I'm not even doing. She said she clearly can't talk to me about how she feels and it's crazy how I'm siding with someone that really hurt her.
Kids of addicts, what was it like? Growing up with both parents being substance addicts, I saw too much and it has definitely made me the person I am today. One memory was my parents were on a particular long and horrible bender. They locked themselves in their bedroom for days on end. I was left to care for myself and siblings alone. We were starving and had no food. I called a family friend crying. He immediately came and broke down the door. What I saw scarred me forever. Blood all over the walls and ceiling due to them using, and it covered everything. They looked like zombies and the smell was so disgusting coming from them and the entire room. They had not bathed or even left the room and were just sweating in their filth. They were smoking it as well and burned marks in the carpet, table, and bed. I'm surprised we didn't have a house fire. They were in such a panic state and fighting the friend I called as he had broke the door down. He yelled to me to take the substances and toss them while he held them both back. They were fiends and screaming as I grabbed it all. I ran to the toilet to flush it all. My mother grabbed me and pinned me against the wall, pounding me. She was so strong she could have ended me. The friend got away from my father and took her off of me. He hurt her and I got away. Traumatized, emotionally stunned. I don't remember how I gathered myself to be strong for my little brother and sister, but I did. We sat in the living room huddled together under a blanket and cried so much. I'm proud to say all three of us have never touched any illegal substances growing up and into adulthood. We are so traumatized by seeing the effects of what using can do to your body, mind, and your loved ones. I turned it into something positive, as substance use and mental health are my strong fields and I have made a career from it. My father ultimately passed away from a dope in 2004. He died at home and of course we witnessed that too. He was a great man and growing up he pressed us to continue our education to better ourselves. He always said to me that he wished he could do better for us and hoped that seeing them struggle with addiction will deter us from following the path they did. My best friend convinced my wife I was cheating on her. Then they both got angry when they realized I was not cheating. My wife and I had a baby last December. It was a traumatic birth and my wife developed postpartum depression. She has been going to therapy weekly. With my wife home full time after the traumatic birth, I've had to work increased hours. This is something we discussed prior to making the decision for her to stay home, and she knew this from the start. A few weeks ago, my boss approached me about a project that would require a lot of overtime in a short amount of time. It would both be great financially and for my career. I talked to my wife about it and she agreed that I should say yes to my boss. For the 4 weeks I'd be working on this, my mother-in-law and her best friend, Jessie, would come help out with some of the duties that I typically do. Jessie is a stay-at-home mom with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. She began coming over during the day and would watch the kids with my wife. 3 weeks into the project, it became clear that we'd need a few more weeks to get it together. I went home that night and talked to my wife about it. She said she was okay with it, but got very cold in the days after. During the last week of the project, I got home one night and saw that Jessie was still at the house. I didn't think much about it, said hi to her and my wife, and then went to go check on our daughter. Before I could get to her room, I heard Jessie say something along the lines of, "He doesn't even stop to greet you." Definitely a sign. I turned around and asked what it was a sign of. Immediately, my wife started crying and Jessie started accusing me of having an affair. She told me that I must hate my wife because she has PPD and am not attracted to her because she gained weight from the pregnancy. Jessie then demanded to see my phone. I told her no. She told me that's a sign that I'm guilty. I told my wife that I would let her see my phone, if she wanted to. She nodded and something inside me broke. I guess it was the thought that she actually believed I was having an affair really got to me, and that she didn't trust me after everything we've been through. Well, she looked through the phone and there was no evidence. Jessie started saying that I deleted the evidence. She started screaming and woke up our daughter, so I told her to get out of the house. Eventually, she left and I went to calm our daughter since my wife was still on the couch crying. When my daughter was asleep again, I sat down by my wife and tried to talk to her about what's been happening. She told me that she's been worried ever since I started working all the overtime. I told her that we'd talked about how good of an opportunity it was and she agreed to letting me take on this project. She said it was very suspicious to increase the length of the project. I told her that sometimes that happens. She wanted more evidence, so I showed her messages and emails with timestamps from work and pay stubs showing the overtime. She said she believed me and was sorry for doubting me. It was just that Jessie had been telling her that these were all signs that I was cheating. I asked her why she believed Jessie more than me, and why she didn't come to me with her concerns. She didn't have a real answer. It's been a couple weeks and the project is over. I actually scaled back and I'm trying to work a little less than I was before the project so I can spend more time with my wife and daughter. What's a news story that got buried that you think more people need to hear? The post office scandal in the UK. Long story short, in 1999 the post office brought in a new computer system, run by Fujitsu, which they rolled out across the entire country. Shortly afterward, individual postmasters, people who run local post offices, began to notice shortfalls in their accounting totals. The post office investigated these cases in isolation and decided the postmasters were stealing money. In reality, these shortfalls were caused by a bug in the Fujitsu software. However, the post office and Fujitsu swept this under the rug, despite receiving reports from independent investigators that the software was to blame. Instead of fixing the software, the post office decided to take their own postmasters to court on fraud charges. It's worth noting that postmasters are effectively like franchise managers for the post office, and are made up largely of nice, unassuming older people who want to run a community service as they wind down towards retirement. You would think that after 4 or 5 of these civil servants with no criminal history were all separately accused of stealing huge sums of money, the post office might wonder if something else was to blame. Nope. Over the next 15 years, the post office prosecuted a frankly incredible 736 of their own postmasters, roughly one every single week. Hundreds more were suspended. In total, thousands were probably affected. These people lost their jobs and often went to prison. They were told they had to pay back thousands of pounds they had supposedly stolen. Some killed themselves from the stress. Many of them kept working until old age and died in debt. It took a class action lawsuit in 2021 for anyone to admit that they were innocent. There is a paper trail showing that executives in the post office and Fujitsu knew of the problems with the software even as it was being developed.
What's the worst defense you've seen someone make in a court? I took a guy to small claims court. His defense was I didn't have the product, so I couldn't ship it to him, obviously. The judge was like, but you took his money? The guy, yay, so I could buy the product and ship it to him. Judge, did you do that? Guy, not yet. Judge, do you have his money? Guy, no, I had an emergency and had to spend it. That was that, I won. A guy was in court for a DUI, and he insisted on taking the stand when his lawyer advised him not to. Turned out he wanted the judge to know the cop who arrested him was just some rude kid trying to be a big shot and he wasn't even drunk. He'd only had 2 bottles of wine with dinner. His lawyer interrupted him to try to get him to stop talking and he told his lawyer to shut up. Then the judge advised him to listen to his lawyer, and he told the judge, I'm not a damn child, don't interrupt me, and the judge just smiled, and sat back and said, please, proceed. We all knew it was over for this guy. He got maxed on the charge, and advised in the future if he was going to pay for a lawyer, he should listen to him.
My delusional boss wrongly fired me after another coworker's mistake, so I sued him and ruined his marriage. Back when I was still in university, I used to work for a hotel to make ends meet. When I started, the hotel very urgently needed new personnel. So I cut a deal with the old owner about getting to choose and pick shifts, so I could visit my courses and exams. Speaking some extra foreign languages, I also got a little bonus each month on top. The old owner was a great guy. He owned multiple hotels, so I rarely saw him. But when he was in the house, he always made a point to have drinks with the staff, chat with us, and if we were free, he even invited those of the front desk to fancy restaurants who were not on shift. Fast forward. I had worked in the hotel for a few years now and was nearing the completion of my studies. So it wouldn't have been an eternity until I had to quit anyway. As I was of course more interested to work in my field of study. As part of my deal with the old owner, I mostly chose to work night shifts, allowing me to visit my courses at university during the day. To make up for my privileges, I had picked up the habit of doing some extra work in the dead of night other shifts would normally have to do, when I in contrast could have sat around and stared at the walls. People were grateful for the help in the beginning. And we became a rather tight-knit group. But over time people rotated in and out. When the old owner retired and his a-hole of a son took over the business as the new owner, I already feared the worst. The new owner didn't like me very much. I never found out the exact reason for that one. I was at that point nearly the sole veteran left from when I started. Among the tasks I had taken on was doing light clerical tasks to ease the manager's job in the morning. For that, I generally had to use the manager's network account. One night while doing my lists, I logged into the manager's account and emailed to do my job. Then I saw an email. With my name in the subject line. I know it is not nice to snoop, but of course, I read it. Turns out the new owner wanted to get rid of me. I still had my old employee contract with the bonuses for foreign language abilities and was allowed by my contract to pick and choose shifts. I can only assume these privileges are what made the new owner hate me. No idea if he had other reasons. Because to be honest, these seem very weak to me. But he couldn't fire me without cause. On top of that, I would be owed severance if fired. And generally, there were not enough bodies in the shift rotation without me. Though the new owner didn't seem to understand the point as the emails told me. I looked for more emails concerning me and found them. There was an email chain between some of the employees, the manager and the new owner. I was of course not ceased as I was the hated topic. The employees didn't like me hogging the night shifts. Because those paid better and for every night you worked you got paid the night bonus. The manager was the only one rather neutral on the matter and just curbed their enthusiasm to get rid of me, as they needed me to be fully staffed. The new owner, and my colleagues actively conspired to make a hostile work environment so I would quit of my own volition. I was furious. I thought about a variety of reactions. From egging their cars to burning down the hotel. But I settled on a less crazy method of revenge. I called my uncle at 2 a.m. asking for advice. My uncle is a lawyer. So for the sake of proof, I forwarded myself all the emails. I made photos, printed them out, made copies and filmed the whole deal just to be sure. My uncle told me to sit tight and see if things got worse, or if it was just bluster. And so I gave it a few days. And things did take a turn. Snide remarks about my looks, clothing and so on were only the tip of the iceberg. Some of the colleagues were just as professional as before. But the conspirators always left extra work for me or pawned of shit duties they normally had to do on me. I always kept a spare shirt and suit at work, just to have a change, which suddenly disappeared. One guy even started to threaten me with violence. But I kept clenching my butt cheeks. I would not give them the satisfaction of saving on the severance or giving in. I am a big boy after all. I did, however, stop doing any extra work I was not obligated to do. Which in the end was the reason they used to fire me. They still had to pay me severance. The next day my uncle with bundled proof of the email and all documented harassment by my colleagues served the hotel my lawsuit. It started with wrongful termination and ended with harassment. Reportedly the manager went white as a sheet when he realized where the emails must have come from. The new owner had been on vacation and had to cancel his expensive vacation in France to deal with this. Their counsel advised them to settle. So I accepted my severance and a hefty bonus on top. Enough money to last me until the end of university without work. But that was not all my revenge. I had gone after the new owner's money. But in the next step, I went after the hotel. I had used all the spare time during night shifts alone, to document every last violation of city, county, district, state and federal law I could find. That went from minor things like some harmless mold under the kitchen sink to substantial violations like modifications to the building. The building was under a limited form of historical protection by federal law, on the grounds of being built and inhabited by somewhat important historical figures a few hundred years back. So every renovation or change in floor plans needs to be signed off on by a committee. Which can take ages. There is also a grant paid to the new owner by the government for keeping the building intact as is. So with my uncle's help, I sent documentation of every violation I could find to the corresponding agency. In 1 month. Everything from health, building code, fire safety to the finance and work police crawled over the hotel. In the end, it was the building and fire inspectors that shut the place down. The new owner had done substantial renovations to the top floor luxury apartments, which he used when he was in town. So the new owner had to pay back the grant, pay fines for unauthorized alterations to the building, endangering his guests, because something wasn't built right according to fire code and had to close down shop until the building was fixed. I also tipped off a friend who had studied journalism and worked at a local paper. The paper ran an article on all the violations accumulated. Which tanked the business once it had reopened, as the newspaper article had led to horrible reviews. In the end, to afford all the fines, repayments and building costs the new owner sold the hotel. As the cherry on top, all the assholes who had tried to harass me lost their job. Granted, the people who didn't do anything to me lost their jobs too. But didn't do anything to stand up for me or help me either. So I don't feel too much remorse. And the revenge cherry on top was, that the new owner, whenever he was in town used to bring home escorts. Which in my country is not illegal. But he was married. It took some doing to get that information to the new owner's wife. But one of my former colleagues, who had quit before this had all happened, had her email. So I let her know what the new owner was up to when he was out of town. I don't know what exactly happened, but they did divorce in the end. Make of that what you will. My wife and I were approached by a very aggressive homeless man and I froze up. She did not. My wife and I, both in our 40s, were walking in the city recently and came across a homeless man who mumbled something at us, got increasingly angry as we tried to ignore him. We did acknowledge him by smiling and nodding quickly but not engaging. He then followed us for a few blocks. Eventually we had to stop at a crosswalk and he just looked at me and said he was gonna kick my f***ing arse and shoved me. Nobody else did anything and they basically kept their distance. I stammered something like, "Hey man, what's your problem? Leave us alone." And tried to protect my wife by standing in front of her. My heart was racing and I was expecting a fight. I wasn't prepared for feeling like I just drank 10 cups of coffee. I'm not used to sounding confrontational so it probably didn't sound too intimidating. He yelled and shoved me again and this time I just froze for a moment wondering if we should run, continue arguing, or I should get into a fight with this idiot. My wife just stepped forward, looked right at him and told him to back off in a louder and more forceful voice than I'd ever heard, even when our kids acted up. He looked surprised and then she clenched her fists and yelled, "Back the fuck off." To the point where we people were looking at us now. It worked though. The guy just muttered something about crazy beach and wandered off. I felt like crap afterwards but she is okay with it. She said that she took a woman's self-defense conference when she started working in the city, which I remembered her saying but didn't think much of it other than it was a good idea. They told her how to use her voice to project strength and that can very often be enough to diffuse a situation since criminals and crazy homeless people often seek out what weakness. I wasn't ready for it so I projected weakness. I realize that now. She also told me something that should have been obvious but wasn't. As a man, I can walk around nearly any city and not be seen as the potential victim that a woman is seen as. Women just have so much more life experience dealing with sketchy men. I'm so proud of her, and this was a wake-up call that I'm going to sign up for self-defense as well. Not going to be caught like that again. Question: what's one rule that was made because of you? During our college days, my friends and I loved visiting this amazing ice cream parlor near campus. The variety of flavors always tempted me, and I couldn't resist trying them all, often ordering more than I could handle and my friends often called me the bottomless pit for ice cream due to my insatiable appetite. However, one day, this humorous nickname led to an embarrassing incident when I attempted to conquer a massive sundae with about a dozen scoops of different flavors. With sheer determination, I took on the challenge, but my stomach surrendered before my willpower did. As a consequence, I ended up feeling quite unwell afterward. The store staff found both amusement and concern in my failed attempt, prompting them to establish a new rule: one scoop only to prevent similar mishaps in the future. Since that eventful day, whenever we revisited the ice cream parlor, they kindly enforced the one scoop only rule for me. It was their thoughtful way of preventing any overindulgence and potential regrets. Even now, whenever we gather for some ice cream goodness, the rule remains in effect, serving as a light-hearted reminder of my past ice cream extravaganzas, much to the amusement of my friends. What is the worst date you've ever been on? Unbeknownst to me, I matched with a homeless fella on Tinder. When I went to pick him up, he was just kinda on the street, but I didn't really think much of it, just thought he was outside his residence. He told me we were going to someplace that he referred to with a very hipster-sounding name. I forget what he called it, but I was under the impression it was a coffee house. Nope. Abandoned warehouses beside the railroad tracks in a dark corner of town. He said he liked looking at the graffiti. I started freaking out because I legit thought I was about to be murdered. Why else would you take your Tinder date at midnight to pitch dark warehouses? So I said it was too cold to hang outside and suggested my house to watch a movie. I know, kinda dumb to lead him to my house, but I was panicking and not thinking straight, and I had a roommate who I knew could kick his ass if need be and had a gun, so that was my best solution to not raise alarm to what might have been my potential murderer. We get back to my house and dude immediately starts to raid my fridge and pantry, makes snarky comments about how I don't have enough organic/gluten-free foods, makes fun of our TV and blabs on about consumerism, then proceeds to plop himself down on my couch, non-organic foods in hand, and turns on the TV to find something he likes. I sat on the far opposite side of the couch and he chooses a JFK conspiracy documentary for us to watch. Then dude stands up and without any warning starts taking off his pants. Just as I was ready to scream for my roommate, I see that he has long johns underneath his pants and he tells me he was getting comfy. This is where it all fell into place for me. Dude is homeless. I decided to push on through the movie and let him enjoy his snacks and TV, that he made fun of originally, for a bit. Throughout the movie he inches closer and closer to me, until towards the end he's right beside me and he wraps his arm around me. The credits had come on just as he did so I immediately shrug off his arm and jump off the couch to the floor and start putting my shoes on. Trying to be pleasant as I can, I tell him it's late and time for me to drop him back off. He then asked, "Aren't you gonna kiss on me a bit?" To which I respond with a firm and somewhat harsh, "Absolutely not." We then drove back to a street corner in complete silence. Bye-bye homeless by choice, not by circumstance, dude. A year later he messaged me via text. We'd exchanged numbers while we were talking after matching on Tinder, but before our meetup, and told me he was becoming a massage therapist and wondered if he could practice on me. I never responded.